Hello and welcome to Muse Fanfiction, your home for amazing stories. Today's story is what if Gringotts rescued Harry from the Dursleys at age 2 and raised him to be the richest king in history. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy it, and subscribe if you haven't already. We post new stories regularly. Let's get started. Chapter 1, The Goblin's Heir. The ancient goblin hunched over his seeing bowl, gnarled fingers trembling as they traced the surface of the still, silvery liquid. Ragnok had served as seer to the Goblin Nation for nearly 3 centuries, but never had the magic stirred with such urgency. His rheumy eyes widened as images flickered in the depths, a cottage in ruins, a child with a jagged wound, and a future where the barriers between wizard and goblin crumbled like sand. Director Ragnok must see this, he whispered, his voice like stone grinding against stone. In the upper levels of Gringotts, beyond the marble halls where wizards conducted their business, Director Ragnok reviewed the day's ledgers with characteristic precision. The knock at his office door was unexpected and unwelcome. "Enter," he barked, not looking up from the parchment before him. "Director." Ragnok bowed, his ancient spine protesting the movement. "The bowl has shown me the Potter heir." Ragnok's quill stopped. "The Potter child is with his mother's kin," Dumbledore assured the Wizengamot. "The bowl does not lie," Ragnok interrupted, an act that would have cost a lesser goblin his position. "The Potter accounts have been active since the parents' deaths, yet no guardian has made contact. The blood-bound vaults are showing distress." Ragnok set down his quill. "Explain." "The Potter family magic is crying out. The heir suffers." The director's black eyes narrowed. "Wizards entrusted their gold to Gringotts not just for our security, but for our neutrality. We do not interfere in their affairs." "This is not interference," Ragnok countered. "This is protection of assets. The Potter accounts represent a significant portion of our holdings. If the heir dies, the inheritance passes to the ministry after the Black Heir, who currently resides in Azkaban," Ragnok finished. "A most inconvenient outcome." Ragnok extended a gnarled hand, revealing a small silver device that spun and whirred. "The heir's blood signature is fading. He has 2 years of magic left, perhaps less." Ragnok's expression didn't change, but he stood, straightening his impeccable suit. "Prepare my carriage. We will verify the heir's condition ourselves." He paused. "Bring Griphook. The boy needs to learn how these matters are handled." Number 4 Privet Drive stood pristine in the November evening, identical to every other house on the street. The magical concealment charms layered upon it were virtually undetectable to wizards, but to goblin eyes, they glowed like beacon fires against the night sky. "Dumbledore's work," Ragnok observed, his lip curling. "Skilled, but arrogant. He never considers that other magics exist beyond his understanding." Young Griphook, barely into his first century, shifted nervously beside the director. "Sir, the wizard authorities are irrelevant," Ragnok cut him off. "The Treaty of 1612 grants us the right to protect financial interests. The Potter vaults qualify." They approached the house, invisible to Muggle eyes. Ragnok placed a small silver disc against the door, which melted through the wood without a sound. The goblins followed it inside. The house was spotless, eerily so. Photographs lined the walls, a fat, pink child in various poses, a horse-faced woman, and a walrus of a man. Not a single image of a black-haired boy with green eyes. "Director," Griphook whispered, pointing to the cupboard under the stairs. A faint magical signature pulsed there, growing weaker by the moment. Ragnok flicked his fingers, and the lock snapped open. The smell hit them first, urine and fear. Then they saw him, a tiny figure curled on a stained mattress, ribs visible through his thin shirt, a lightning-shaped scar angry and red against his pale forehead. The boy was awake, staring at them with eyes too old for his face. He didn't cry out. He didn't move. He simply watched, as though wondering what new torment these strange creatures might bring. Ragnok had lived through wars, through rebellions, through centuries of wizard prejudice. He had never felt the surge of rage that coursed through him now. "Mr. Potter," he said, keeping his voice level despite his fury, "my name is Director Ragnok of Gringotts Bank. I have come concerning your accounts." The child blinked slowly. "I don't have any money," he whispered, his voice raspy from disuse. "On the contrary," Ragnok replied, "you have quite a lot. More importantly, you have the right to be treated according to your station." He extended a long-fingered hand. "Would you like to come with us?" Harry Potter, for indeed, this was the famous boy who lived, though he knew nothing of his fame, stared at the offered hand. He had learned early that adults were not to be trusted, that offers of help concealed traps. "Why?" he asked simply. Griphook stepped forward. "Because you belong to a different world, Harry Potter. A world your parents left for you. A world where you matter." Something flickered in those green eyes, not hope, for hope had been beaten out of him, but perhaps curiosity. Slowly, he reached for Ragnok's hand. The moment their fingers touched, a shiver of magic passed between them. Ragnok's eyes widened fractionally. This was no ordinary wizard child. The magic in his blood sang with ancient power, untrained but potent. "Quickly," Ragnok ordered. "The wards will have alerted Dumbledore." As they helped the boy from his cupboard, a thunderous knock rattled the front door. Vernon Dursley's bellow echoed from upstairs, "Boy! What have you done now?" Ragnok clasped a medallion hanging from his neck, pulling Harry and Griphook close. "Gringotts," he commanded, and the world spun away in a flash of silver light. Albus Dumbledore paced the marble floors of Gringotts' main hall, his usual twinkling demeanor replaced by cold fury. The goblins had gone too far this time, far beyond the bounds of their treaties. "I demand to see Director Ragnok immediately," he told the sneering teller for the third time. "This is a matter of national security." "The director is in conference," came the unchanging reply. "You may make an appointment for next week." "You have taken Harry Potter from his legal guardians," Dumbledore stated, lowering his voice to prevent the other patrons from hearing. "Return him at once, or I shall be forced to involve the ministry." The teller smiled, revealing pointed teeth. "Fascinating accusation, Chief Warlock. Do you have evidence of this alleged kidnapping?" Dumbledore's patience thinned. "The blood wards at his aunt's home have collapsed. My instruments indicate he is here, within Gringotts." "Your instruments must be mistaken," the teller replied smoothly. "Perhaps you should have them checked. Now, unless you have banking business to conduct, I must ask you to step aside. You're holding up the queue." A wizard coughed pointedly behind Dumbledore, who turned to find Lucius Malfoy watching the exchange with unconcealed interest. "Trouble, headmaster?" Malfoy inquired, malice glinting in his cold eyes. "The boy who lived gone missing, perhaps." "How, concerning?" Dumbledore straightened, his mind racing. News of Harry's disappearance could not become public. Not yet. Not until he had rectified this disaster. "Not at all, Lucius. A simple banking matter." He turned back to the teller. "I will return tomorrow. Please inform your director that postponing our meeting is unwise." As Dumbledore swept from the bank, the teller pressed a hidden button beneath his desk. Deep below the public halls of Gringotts, a signal chimed in Ragnok's office. "The wizard has gone," Ragnok noted. "Temporarily." Across from him, wrapped in a warm blanket and sipping hot chocolate, Harry Potter watched with wary eyes. A goblin healer hovered nearby, cataloguing the boy's injuries with growing outrage. "Malnutrition, Director. Improperly healed fractures in the right arm and 3 ribs. Early signs of magical suppression." The healer's voice dropped. "Had we waited another year, his core might have been permanently damaged." Ragnok nodded grimly. "You understand, Mr. Potter, that what we have done will cause significant, political complications." Harry looked down at his mug. "You'll send me back, then?" "No. The word came from Griphook, who had remained silently by the door. All eyes turned to him, and the young goblin flushed but continued. The Goblin Nation does not return assets to those who would damage them. Ragnok raised an eyebrow at the outburst but did not contradict his subordinate. Griphook speaks out of turn, but he is not incorrect. Your family has been a valued client of Gringotts for 7 centuries, Mr. Potter. We protect our investments. I'm an investment? Harry asked, his voice small but not fearful, simply curious. You are the heir to one of Britain's oldest magical houses, Ragnok explained. Your vault alone contains enough gold to purchase a small country. But more importantly, he leaned forward, his black eyes intense. You are a child of magic, and you have been wronged. Harry considered this, his thin face serious beyond his years. What happens now? Now, said Ragnok, we prepare for war. The war, as it happened, was primarily legal and political. While Harry recovered in the depths of Gringotts, teams of goblin solicitors engaged in battle with the Ministry of Magic. Old treaties were invoked, obscure clauses cited, and enough paperwork generated to fill 3 archive rooms. Minister Fudge, initially outraged at the goblins' presumption, quickly changed his tune when Gringotts hinted at calling in the ministry substantial loans. Dumbledore proved more persistent, appealing to the International Confederation of Wizards, only to be reminded that goblin banking rights superseded even their authority in matters of inheritance. Meanwhile, Harry Potter began to learn what it meant to be both wizard and goblin friend. Again, instructed Gornik, weapons master of the deep halls. A Potter does not slouch. 6-year-old Harry straightened his spine, adjusting his grip on the ceremonial dagger. For years had transformed the malnourished toddler into a lean, agile child with quick reflexes and quicker wit. The blade is an extension of your honor, Gornik continued. It does not cut unless cutting serves justice. It does not threaten unless threat is necessary. It remains sharp, but sheathed, until the moment of need. Harry completed the ritual forms, his movements precise. When he finished, he bowed to his instructor, then carefully sheathed the silver dagger at his hip, his first gift from Director Ragnok on the day the final custody agreements were signed. Well executed, Gornik grudgingly admitted. Your magical studies proceed equally well. Sharptooth says my arithmancy is acceptable, Harry replied, using the careful understatement valued in goblin culture. In truth, he had already mastered calculations that stumped most 4th-year Hogwarts students. Gornik grunted approval. Director Ragnok wishes to see you. The wand maker has arrived. Harry's eyes widened. Though raised among goblins, he knew his magical education must eventually include wizard practices. The wand would be his first step into that other world. In Ragnok's office, he found not the elderly Ollivander he had expected, but a dark-skinned man with keen eyes and an accent Harry couldn't place. Ah, the young Potter, the man said, bowing respectfully to both Harry and Ragnok. I am Adebayo Alayemi, wandcrafter of the Ivory Coast. Your guardian requested my services specifically. Ragnok nodded. Mr. Alayemi creates wands that respond to more varied magical signatures than those crafted in Britain. Given your unusual upbringing, we thought this prudent. The wand maker opened an intricately carved box. I have brought cores and woods that might suit a child raised in the deep ways. He smiled at Harry's surprise. Yes, I know something of goblin magic. Few wizards bother to learn, which is their loss. For the next hour, Harry touched different woods and cores, feeling for the resonance Alayemi described. Some materials rejected him outright. Others felt compatible but not compelling. Interesting, the wand maker murmured after the 20th combination failed. You have an affinity for metal, perhaps? Most unusual in a wizard. He reached into a hidden compartment and withdrew a slender rod of pale wood with silver threads running through it. Rowan with silver filigree. And for the core. He hesitated, then produced a small vial containing what looked like liquid silver. This is freely given goblin blood, provided by your guardian for this purpose. Combined with phoenix feather. A unique pairing I would not normally attempt, but these are unusual circumstances. The creation of the wand took place behind closed doors, with only Ragnok permitted to witness the process. When Harry finally held the completed wand, a surge of power rushed through him unlike anything he had experienced. Silver and gold sparks erupted from the tip, forming the shape of a rearing lion before dissolving. The Potter family symbol, Ragnok observed. Your heritage acknowledges you. Alayemi looked troubled. A powerful wand for a powerful wizard. Use it wisely, young Potter. It will serve both sides of your nature. After the wandmaker departed, Harry practiced simple spells under Ragnok's watchful eye. His progress was rapid, his control exceptional for his age. You understand, Harry, that what you learn here must remain secret when you eventually attend Hogwarts, Ragnok said. The wizarding world does not approve of our methods. Harry lowered his wand. Why must I go to Hogwarts at all? I could continue learning here. Politics, Ragnok replied bluntly. The custody agreement stipulates formal wizarding education. Besides, a king must know his subjects. I'm not a king, Harry objected. Ragnok's smile revealed pointed teeth. Not yet. By his 8th birthday, Harry had mastered the Goblin language, basic financial management, and enough wizarding etiquette to navigate both worlds. His education continued in wandwork, arithmancy, and a carefully moderated form of goblin battle magic that emphasized defense and perception rather than offense. He had also gained something resembling a brother in Griphook, now his assigned liaison to the upper levels of Gringotts. The wizards are staring again, Griphook muttered as they walked through Diagon Alley, Harry disguised with a subtle glamour that altered his features just enough to conceal his identity. Let them stare, Harry replied in gobbledygook. They see only what they expect, a goblin and his client. Their destination was Flourish and Blots, where Harry selected books on subjects not covered in the goblin libraries, herbology, astronomy, and the history of wizarding families. His own family history remained largely a mystery, as the Potter family grimoire would only open to him once he reached magical maturity. As they paid for their purchases, a bushy-haired girl approximately Harry's age approached, her eyes bright with curiosity. Excuse me, she said, addressing Griphook directly rather than looking past him as most wizards did. I couldn't help noticing your companion selections. Are you a tutor? Griphook blinked, momentarily surprised by being addressed as an equal. I am a financial advisor, he replied stiffly. The girl turned to Harry. Are you homeschooled too? I'm learning magic at home until Hogwarts. I'm Muggle-born, you see, and there's so much to catch up on. Harry studied her with interest. Few wizard children initiated conversations with strangers, especially those in the company of goblins. Yes, I have private tutors, he said carefully. I'm Hermione Granger, she offered, extending her hand. My parents are dentists. They're across the street getting coffee while I shop for books. Harry hesitated, then decided a partial truth was best. I'm Harry. My parents are deceased, but my guardian ensures my education. Hermione's face softened with sympathy. I'm sorry about your parents. It must be difficult growing up without them. The simple kindness in her voice caught Harry off guard. Among goblins, showing vulnerability was discouraged, and personal losses were acknowledged with respect rather than sympathy. He found himself unexpectedly moved. Thank you, he said quietly. It is challenging at times. Griphook cleared his throat, reminding Harry of their schedule. They needed to visit the apothecary before returning to Gringotts. Perhaps we'll meet again at Hogwarts, Harry told Hermione, genuinely hoping it was true. Human children his age were a rarity in his life. I'd like that, she replied with a bright smile. It would be nice to know someone before the term starts. As they left the bookshop, Harry pondered the encounter. She spoke to you first, he observed to Griphook. As an equal. An anomaly, Griphook dismissed, though Harry noted he seemed pleased. Muggleborns occasionally lack the ingrained prejudices of wizarding society. They learn them quickly enough. Not always, Harry countered. My mother was Muggleborn, and she married into an old family without abandoning her principles. Griphook snorted. Lily Potter was exceptional in many ways. Director Ragnok still speaks of her with respect, which is rare for any wizard, let alone a witch. The mention of his mother sent a familiar pang through Harry's chest. Despite years with the goblins, he knew little about his parents beyond their financial records and the occasional anecdote. The wizarding world celebrated James and Lily Potter as heroes who died fighting Voldemort, but to Harry, they remained abstract figures, names and vault numbers rather than flesh and memory. I wish I could have known them, he admitted, a rare moment of openness. Griphook's expression softened almost imperceptibly. They would have been proud of the wizard you are becoming, Harry Potter. And perhaps someday, you will know them better than you think. On his 10th birthday, Harry received a summons to the lowest level of Gringotts, a rare honor even for one raised among goblins. Ragnok himself escorted him past security measures that would have eviscerated any unauthorized visitor. Few wizards have seen what you are about to witness, the director explained as they descended in a specially charmed cart. What is revealed here must never be spoken of outside these walls. They emerged into a vast cavern lit by floating globes of bluish light. The ceiling soared hundreds of feet overhead, and the stone floor had been polished to a mirror shine. At the center stood a circle of ancient goblins, their faces more deeply lined than any Harry had seen before. The Council of Elders, Ragnok announced, bowing deeply. Harry followed suit, holding the position until a gnarled voice spoke. Rise, Harry Potter, said the eldest goblin, his eyes milky with age. We have watched your progress these 8 years. The time has come for decisions. Harry straightened, careful to maintain the posture Gornik had drilled into him. I am honored by your attention, elders. The ancient goblin smiled, revealing few remaining teeth. I am Ragnok, seer of the deep halls. It was my vision that brought you to us. He gestured to the circle. We have called you here to offer a choice no wizard has been given in 7 centuries. Another elder stepped forward, carrying a small wooden box. The wizard Dumbledore believes you are destined to defeat the dark wizard who marked you. He has planned your life accordingly, placing you with abusive relatives to ensure your compliance, intending to mold you into a weapon of his design. Harry nodded. This was not new information. The goblins had been forthright about Dumbledore's machinations once he was old enough to understand. What you do not know, continued Ragnok, is that there exists an older prophecy concerning you. One made before your birth, recorded in the Hall of Voices. He nodded to another elder, who raised a crystal sphere. Within the crystal, silvery mist swirled, then took the shape of a goblin face. A deep voice spoke in ancient gobbledygook, the words archaic even to Harry's trained ear. When it finished, the mist dissolved. The translation, Ragnok explained, speaks of a human child raised in the deep ways who will bridge the worlds of wizard and goblin, bringing forth a new age of magical cooperation. This child will hold the power to elevate both races or destroy them, depending on the path chosen. Harry absorbed this silently, his mind racing. You believe this refers to me? We know it does, replied Ragnok. The prophecy speaks of the lightning-marked one. Furthermore, your magical signature has confirmed it. You carry both wizard and goblin magic in your veins. How is that possible? Harry asked. I'm human. The elder holding the wooden box stepped forward. Magic recognizes intent and sacrifice. When Director Ragnok saved you from death by magical starvation, he performed a ritual of last resort, a blood adoption. Harry's eyes widened, turning to Ragnok in shock. You never told me. It was not a full adoption, Ragnok explained, looking somewhat uncomfortable. Merely enough to stabilize your core and ensure your survival. But magic has its own ways, and it seems my blood found yours, compatible. Ragnok raised a hand. This is why we offer you choice, Harry Potter. In 1 year, your Hogwarts letter will arrive. You may attend as any wizard would, keeping your goblin education secret. Or, he opened the wooden box, revealing a small silver key. You may claim formal recognition as a friend of the Goblin Nation, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. What would that mean, exactly? Harry asked, eyeing the key cautiously. It would mean acknowledging your dual nature publicly, said one of the female elders. The wizarding world would know you were raised by us and owe us allegiance. Some would consider you tainted. Others would fear your influence. It would also mean access to knowledge no wizard has been granted in centuries, added another elder. Goblin metallurgy. Blood magic. Financial systems that control the flow of power throughout magical Britain. Harry considered the implications. And if I choose to keep my goblin education private? Then you play the role Dumbledore expects, the lost boy hero, returned to wizarding society, naive and malleable. Ragnok's voice carried a hint of disappointment. You would have greater freedom of movement, but less access to our deeper resources. This is not a choice to be made lightly, Ragnok cautioned. You have 1 year to decide. Until then, the key remains here, waiting. Harry bowed again. I understand the honor you do me, elders. I will consider carefully. As they left the council chamber, Harry remained silent, processing everything he had learned. It wasn't until they reached Ragnok's office that he finally spoke. Why didn't you tell me about the blood adoption? Ragnok sighed, suddenly looking older than his considerable years. I feared you would misinterpret the action, believe we saved you only to use you, as Dumbledore planned to do. And didn't you? Harry asked, his voice carefully neutral. Initially, perhaps our motivations were not entirely altruistic, Ragnok admitted. The Potter accounts represent significant holdings. But Harry, for the first time, he placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. You have become more than an asset to Gringotts. You are the son I never expected to have. The admission stunned Harry. Goblins rarely expressed such sentiments, considering emotional displays unnecessary. For Ragnok to acknowledge a paternal bond was unprecedented. I don't know what to say, Harry confessed. Say nothing, Ragnok replied, composure returning. But know this, whatever you choose in the coming year, you will always have a place in the deep halls. The final months before Harry's 11th birthday passed in a flurry of intensified training. If he were to attend Hogwarts, and despite the Elder's offer, all parties assumed he would, he needed to be prepared for the wizarding world's scrutiny and Dumbledore's manipulations. Your public persona must be carefully calibrated, instructed Silvermark, Gringotts protocol master. Too knowledgeable, and they will suspect goblin influence. Too ignorant, and you become vulnerable to those who would guide you for their own purposes. Harry practiced presenting different versions of himself, the wide-eyed orphan discovering magic for the first time, the quietly confident heir managing his affairs, the studious pupil eager to learn. Each mask served a purpose, a strategy borrowed from goblin negotiation tactics. Remember, Griphook advised during their final training session in wandless magic, wizards rely too heavily on their wands. They forget that intent shapes magic more than wood or incantations. To demonstrate, he conjured a small flame in his palm, then extinguished it with a thought. Harry repeated the exercise, the flame in his hand burning brighter than Griphook's. Years of goblin magical training had given him exceptional control over his considerable raw power. Impressive, Griphook acknowledged. But at Hogwarts, I know, Harry sighed. Hide my abilities. Use the wand for everything. Appear average. Not average, Griphook corrected. Exceptional in expected ways. They anticipate the son of James Potter to excel at defense against the dark arts and Quidditch. Lily Potter's son should show aptitude for charms. Give them what they expect, and they will not look deeper. As July approached, preparations intensified. The goblins had long since neutralized the tracking charms on Harry's Hogwarts letter, ensuring it would be delivered to a carefully prepared location rather than revealing his residence within Gringotts. Legal documents established a fictional wizarding guardian who had supposedly raised Harry in seclusion for his protection, close enough to the truth to withstand casual scrutiny. On the morning of his 11th birthday, Harry stood in ceremonial robes before the assembled goblin leadership. The past decade had transformed him from a broken child into a young wizard of unusual poise and capability. Tall for his age, with his father's untamable hair and his mother's piercing green eyes, he cut an impressive figure despite his youth. Harry James Potter, Ragnok announced formally, "Today you stand at the threshold of two worlds. The choices you make in the coming years will shape not only your destiny but the future of wizard-goblin relations." He presented a small golden key. "Your trust vault is now accessible. The main Potter vaults will become available upon your majority." Harry accepted the key with a formal bow. "May it open doors to prosperity for all." The traditional goblin response brought approving murmurs from the assembled crowd. As the ceremony concluded, Harry prepared to retreat to his quarters for a private celebration with Griphook and his closer goblin friends. Before he could leave, however, a commotion erupted near the main entrance to the hall. A small barn owl swooped in, evading the security measures through some unknown magic, and dropped a letter directly at Harry's feet. The parchment envelope bore an unmistakable wax seal, the Hogwarts crest. Harry stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at Ragnok, whose expression had darkened. "It seems," the director said, "that Dumbledore is more resourceful than we anticipated. The game begins sooner than expected." Harry picked up the letter, weighing it in his hand. It felt heavier than mere parchment should, weighted with expectations, with history, with the future the wizarding world had planned for him. "Then let us play," he replied, breaking the seal. In that moment, standing among those who had rescued, raised, and trained him, Harry Potter made his first true decision as both wizard and goblin friend. He would enter the wizarding world on his own terms, carrying the lessons of the deep halls into whatever challenges awaited. He was not the weapon Dumbledore had intended to forge. He was something far more dangerous, a wizard who understood the true nature of power, not the fleeting authority of politics or the brute force of combat magic, but the lasting influence of wealth, knowledge, and carefully cultivated connections. The boy who lived was about to become the king who rules, and neither the wizarding world nor Hogwarts would ever be the same. Chapter 2, Two Worlds. The scarlet steam engine gleamed in the morning light as Harry Potter studied it from a discreet distance. Platform 9 3/4 bustled with activity, tearful parents, excited children, hooting owls, and the occasional escaped toad. It was precisely the chaotic scene the goblins had prepared him for, yet experiencing it firsthand still felt surreal. "Remember your training," Griphook murmured beside him. The young goblin wore an impeccable human disguise, a glamour so flawless that even magical eyes would see only a stern-faced wizard in conservative robes. "First impressions are critical." Harry nodded, adjusting his unremarkable second-hand robes. The decision to appear modest rather than wealthy had been strategic, better to be underestimated initially. His genuine treasures, including his unique wand and several goblin-crafted artifacts, were concealed in a trunk with security features that would make most cursebreakers weep. "I remember," Harry replied softly. "Observe first. Speak little. Trust no one immediately." Griphook's disguised face revealed a hint of pride. "You are prepared, Harry Potter. But if you require assistance, the communication mirror is secured in my trunk's third compartment, password protected and warded against detection," Harry finished with a small smile. "I'll be fine, Griphook. You and Ragnok have trained me well." A family of redheads rushed past, their mother's voice carrying over the crowd as she herded her numerous children toward the train. Harry recognized the description instantly: the Weasleys, an old pure-blood family with minimal financial assets but significant political connections through their father's ministry position. Potential allies or complications? Harry mused quietly. Both, Griphook assessed. Their loyalty to Dumbledore is well documented, but they value family above politics. Approach with caution. Harry's gaze shifted, catching sight of a familiar bushy-haired figure navigating the crowd with her parents. Hermione Granger looked nervous but determined, clutching a heavy book to her chest as she said goodbye to the anxious-looking muggles beside her. The girl from the bookshop, Harry noted with interest. A coincidence worth investigating, Griphook agreed. The train departs in 7 minutes. You should board. Harry turned to his disguised guardian, suddenly aware that this was a genuine goodbye. For all their preparation, he had never been separated from his goblin family for more than a day. May your gold flow and your enemies tremble, he said formally in gobbledygook, offering the traditional farewell. Griphook's glamoured eyes gleamed with unexpected emotion. May your vaults fill and your blade stay sharp, he returned, then added in a lower voice, be safe, brother friend. With a final nod, Harry stepped forward into his new life, disappearing into the crowd with practiced ease. The journey to Hogwarts proved educational. Harry selected a compartment strategically, not entirely empty, but not too crowded, and settled in with a carefully chosen book on basic magical theory. His fellow travelers, 2 quiet Hufflepuff second years, were perfect companions, friendly enough to make introductions but too absorbed in their own conversation to interrogate him. Halfway through the journey, the compartment door slid open to reveal Hermione Granger, looking flustered. Excuse me, she began, has anyone seen a toad? A boy named Neville has lost one. Her eyes widened in recognition as they landed on Harry. Oh. You're the boy from Flourish and Blots, aren't you? Harry, right? Harry smiled, pleased she had remembered. That's right. Hello again, Hermione. The Hufflepuffs looked between them curiously. You two know each other, one asked. We met briefly in Diagon Alley, Harry explained, standing to properly greet Hermione. No toads here, I'm afraid, but I could help you look if you'd like. Hermione's grateful smile confirmed he'd made the right choice. Building connections early was essential to his long-term strategy. As they searched the train, Harry carefully guided their conversation, learning about Hermione's background and ambitions while revealing selected details of his own fictional upbringing. My guardian preferred I learn at home until Hogwarts, he explained when she asked about his previous education. He believed in a well-rounded approach, languages, mathematics, history, and the basics of magic. That sounds wonderful, Hermione said wistfully. My parents supported my learning, of course, but they couldn't teach me anything about magic. I've been trying to catch up by memorizing all our textbooks. Harry considered her thoughtfully. Intelligent, driven, and isolated by her intellect, she reminded him of certain young goblins he'd studied with. Knowledge is valuable, he agreed, but practical application matters too. Perhaps we could study together sometimes. The hope that bloomed on her face told him she hadn't expected to find friends so quickly. I'd like that very much. Their search eventually led them to a compartment containing a round-faced boy who looked close to tears. No luck, Neville, Hermione reported. This is Harry. He's been helping me look. Thanks anyway, Neville mumbled, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Gran's going to kill me. Trevor was a gift from my great-uncle Algy. Harry studied the boy with interest. Neville Longbottom? He inquired, recognizing the name from his studies of wizarding genealogy. Neville looked up in surprise. Yes, how did you? Our parents were friends, Harry said simply, extending his hand. I'm Harry Potter. The reaction was immediate. Neville's eyes widened comically, while Hermione gasped. Harry Potter. The Harry Potter, she exclaimed. I've read all about you. You're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts and, most of what's written is speculation, Harry interrupted gently. I was raised in seclusion, away from public scrutiny. He turned back to Neville, who was staring at him with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. I believe we were meant to grow up knowing each other, Neville. Perhaps we can remedy that oversight now. Before Neville could respond, the compartment door slid open again, revealing a pale, pointed-faced boy flanked by two larger students. "Is it true?" the boy demanded without preamble. "They're saying Harry Potter is on the train." Harry assessed the newcomer quickly: expensive robes, aristocratic bearing, and an air of entitlement that screamed old money. Malfoy, he identified, drawing on his knowledge of pureblood families. "Draco, I presume." The blond boy looked momentarily wrong-footed but recovered quickly. "You know of me? Good. You'll soon learn that some wizarding families are better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort." His gaze flicked dismissively to Neville and Hermione. Years of goblin diplomatic training served Harry well as he considered his response. A direct rebuke would create an enemy, but subservience would show weakness. Instead, he chose a third path. "The goblins of Gringotts have a saying," he replied conversationally. "Judge gold by its purity, not its holder." "I prefer to evaluate people individually, Malfoy." Draco's brow furrowed, clearly not expecting this response. "Goblins? What would you know about?" "My guardian conducted significant business with Gringotts," Harry interjected smoothly. "I find their philosophies instructive." The statement was true enough to withstand scrutiny while revealing little. Harry extended his hand. "I appreciate the offer of guidance, Malfoy. Perhaps we could continue this conversation another time. I was just catching up with the son of my parents' friends." The subtle reminder of Harry's connection to old families gave Draco pause. After a moment's hesitation, he shook the offered hand. "My father says networking is essential at Hogwarts. I'll find you after the sorting, Potter." As Malfoy and his entourage departed, Hermione looked at Harry with newfound respect. "That was impressive. You didn't reject him outright, but you didn't let him insult us either." Harry smiled. Diplomacy is often more effective than confrontation. He turned to Neville, who was watching him with curious eyes. "Now, about your toad. Have you considered a summoning charm?" "But we haven't learned those yet," Hermione objected. "True," Harry acknowledged, "but the principle is simple enough." He withdrew his wand, the ordinary one provided by Ollivander during a carefully orchestrated public visit to Diagon Alley, not his true silver-threaded wand, and demonstrated the correct movement. The incantation is Accio followed by the object. Perhaps a prefect could help. This suggestion led to the successful recovery of Trevor and, more importantly, the foundation of Harry's first alliance at Hogwarts. By the time they reached Hogsmeade Station, both Neville and Hermione had begun to regard him as a natural leader, knowledgeable without being condescending, confident without arrogance. The first phase of his integration was proceeding exactly as planned. The Great Hall exceeded even the goblins' detailed descriptions. Enchanted ceiling, floating candles, gleaming tableware, Hogwarts displayed its wealth and magic with an ostentation that would have made the more austere goblins sniff with disapproval. As Harry stood among the first years awaiting sorting, he felt hundreds of eyes upon him. The whispers followed him like persistent shadows. "That's him, Harry Potter. Where has he been all these years? Did you see the scar?" He maintained the calm demeanor Ragnok had instilled in him, neither seeking attention nor shying away from it. When Professor McGonagall called his name, the hall fell silent. The sorting hat settled over his eyes, and Harry immediately sensed its intrusion into his mind. He allowed it access to carefully constructed surface thoughts while occluding his deeper training and connections. "Interesting," a small voice murmured in his ear. "Very interesting. A mind unlike any I've encountered in centuries. You have secrets, Mr. Potter, layers upon layers of them." "I would prefer those remain private," Harry thought firmly. The hat chuckled. "Your secrets are safe with me. I am bound to confidentiality. But where to put you? You have courage worthy of Gryffindor, certainly. A keen mind that would thrive in Ravenclaw. Loyalty to those who've earned it, Hufflepuff would nurture that. An ambition, oh yes, such ambition would serve you well in Slytherin. Harry considered his options. Each house offered different advantages and challenges. Where would I have the greatest autonomy to pursue my goals? A revealing question, the hat remarked. Not, where do I belong or, where will I be happiest, but where you can best advance your agenda. Very well, Mr. Potter. For you, it had better be, Gryffindor. The last word echoed through the hall, triggering thunderous applause from the red and gold table. Harry removed the hat and walked calmly to join his new housemates, accepting their enthusiastic welcome with practiced modesty. As he sat between Neville and an older red-headed boy who introduced himself as Percy Weasley, Harry caught Dumbledore's gaze from the head table. The ancient wizard's eyes twinkled with satisfaction behind half-moon spectacles. He thinks his plan is proceeding accordingly, Harry realized. The boy who lived in Gryffindor, just like his parents. Predictable and malleable. Harry inclined his head respectfully to the headmaster, then turned his attention to his new housemates. The subtle game of influence had begun, and he intended to play it masterfully. The first weeks at Hogwarts provided Harry with ample opportunity to assess both the institution and its inhabitants. He quickly established himself as an above-average student, exceptional in defense against the dark arts and charms as expected, competent but unremarkable in other subjects. His true abilities remained carefully concealed. Each night, behind privacy wards far more sophisticated than any first year should know, he practiced the advanced magic the goblins had taught him and maintained communication with Gringotts through his enchanted mirror. Dumbledore watches you constantly, Ragnok observed during one such conversation. His puppet Snape as well. Harry nodded, keeping his voice low despite the wards. Professor Snape seems determined to provoke me into revealing something. His hostility is too calculated to be merely personal. A test, perhaps, Ragnok suggested. Dumbledore likely instructed him to gauge your temperament and abilities. How are you responding? With measured competence and restrained emotion, Harry replied. I answer his questions correctly but not brilliantly. When he attempts to provoke me, I remain polite but not subservient. Ragnok's sharp teeth gleamed in the mirror's reflection. Good. Neither weakness nor defiance. How progresses your social integration? Effectively, Harry reported. Hermione Granger has become a close ally, her intelligence and work ethic are exceptional. Neville Longbottom lacks confidence but possesses significant untapped magical potential. The Weasley twins have useful connections throughout the school and a disregard for rules that could prove advantageous. And your financial initiatives? Harry smiled. This was where his goblin education truly distinguished him from his peers. While other first years struggled with homesickness or academic pressures, Harry had already begun implementing the economic strategies Gringotts had taught him. Phase 1 is complete, he explained. I've identified market inefficiencies within Hogwarts and begun developing solutions. The Owl Order catalog for Muggle-born students launches next week, with Gringotts handling currency exchange and fulfillment. Ragnok nodded approvingly. Modest but promising. Remember, building wealth requires patience and foresight. Small ventures now will establish the foundation for larger operations later. As October arrived, Harry's careful balancing act between academic performance and social integration continued. He joined the Gryffindor Quidditch team after a coincidental display of flying skill during lessons, a calculated move that enhanced his standing among his peers while fulfilling expectations about his father's talents. Hermione had initially disapproved of his rule-bending until Harry explained his reasoning one evening in the library. It's not about breaking rules for entertainment, he told her as they researched charms for a class project. It's about understanding which rules serve a purpose and which exist merely as artificial barriers. Hermione looked skeptical. That sounds like justifying whatever you want to do. Not at all, Harry countered. Consider magical education. Certain restrictions exist for safety, those should be respected. Others exist due to tradition or bureaucracy and may actually impede learning. Discerning the difference is part of developing good judgment. I suppose that makes sense, she conceded reluctantly. But how do you decide which is which? Harry considered her question carefully. Hermione's brilliant mind deserved a thoughtful answer, not platitudes. I evaluate potential consequences and underlying principles. Is a rule protecting something valuable? Does breaking it harm others? Does it restrict access to knowledge that could be beneficial? Hermione's expression shifted from skepticism to interest. That's, actually quite ethical. Not what I expected. What did you expect? Harry asked, genuinely curious. I'm not sure, she admitted. You sometimes speak like you're older than you are. Like you've thought about things most 11-year-olds haven't. Harry smiled slightly. My upbringing was unconventional. You never really talk about it, Hermione observed. Your guardian, I mean. A private man with unconventional views on education, Harry replied, the practiced half-truth coming easily. He believed in practical knowledge over theory and self-sufficiency above all. Before Hermione could probe further, they were interrupted by a commotion several tables away. Ron Weasley, a Gryffindor classmate with whom Harry maintained cordial but distant relations, had knocked over an inkwell while arguing with Draco Malfoy. Trouble, Harry murmured, gathering their books as Madame Pants descended upon the offenders with righteous fury. They escaped the library just before the inevitable ejections began. In the corridor, Hermione turned to Harry with unexpected determination in her eyes. Someday you'll trust me enough to tell me the truth, she said quietly. Until then, I'll respect your privacy. Her perception startled him. The goblins had warned that his careful facade might not fool the most observant wizards, but he hadn't expected an 11-year-old girl to see through him so quickly. Thank you, Hermione, he replied simply, neither confirming nor denying her suspicion. She smiled, and in that moment, Harry recognized something he hadn't expected to find at Hogwarts, not just an ally, but a genuine friend. Halloween brought Harry's carefully constructed world crashing into harsh reality. The mountain troll incident, which Harry strongly suspected was no accident, forced him to reveal more of his abilities than planned when Hermione found herself cornered in a bathroom. Arriving moments before Ron Weasley, who had inadvertently caused Hermione's isolation through thoughtless comments, Harry assessed the situation with goblin-trained precision. The troll had Hermione trapped against the wall, its massive club raised to strike. Training and instinct took over. Without conscious thought, Harry flicked his wand in a pattern Gornik had drilled into him countless times, a goblin disarming technique adapted for wizarding combat. Dirua Armum, he incanted, sending a focused blast of magic at the troll's wrist. The spell, far beyond first-year level, struck with surgical precision. The troll's club went flying, embedding itself in the ceiling with a thunderous crack. The creature howled in confusion, looking up at its lost weapon. Ron burst in seconds later, wand raised uncertainly. Hermione. Harry. What, distract it. Harry commanded, already moving toward Hermione. He switched to a standard levitation charm as Ron began shouting and throwing debris at the increasingly agitated troll. Wingardium Leviosa. Harry directed the charm at the embedded club, wrenching it free and positioning it above the troll's head. With careful timing, he released the spell, allowing the massive weapon to knock its owner unconscious. As the dust settled and teachers arrived, Harry quickly evaluated the political ramifications. He had revealed combat magic no first year should know. Damage control was essential. I read about trolls in a book from the library, he explained to the assembled professors, projecting innocent earnestness. It said their joints are vulnerable, so I tried to aim for its wrist. I got lucky. McGonagall seemed skeptical but too relieved at their safety to press further. Snape, however, watched Harry with narrowed, calculating eyes. The potion's master had recognized the spell for what it was, a controlled combat technique rather than a desperate fluke. Later that night, after the excitement had died down and points had been both deducted and awarded, Harry contacted Ragnok through the mirror. An unfortunate exposure, the Goblin director concluded after hearing Harry's account. though perhaps inevitable. Your true nature cannot remain entirely hidden while you develop your powers. Professor Snape suspects something, Harry said. And Hermione is too observant for her own good. The girl could become a liability, or an asset, Ragnok mused. What does your instinct tell you? Harry considered the question carefully. She values knowledge above rules. And loyalty above ambition. If approached correctly, she could be trusted. Then begin testing those qualities, Ragnok advised. As for Snape, allow him to believe he's uncovered a partial truth, perhaps that your mysterious guardian taught you some defensive magic. Let that satisfy his suspicion while concealing the deeper reality. The troll incident marked a turning point in Harry's Hogwarts experience. His friendship with Hermione and Ron solidified, though Ron remained unaware of the carefully measured nature of Harry's self-disclosure. More importantly, Harry began identifying other potential allies throughout the school, students whose talents or connections might prove valuable. Susan Bones, whose aunt headed the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Blaise Zabini, whose family's international business empire spanned magical Europe. Even Draco Malfoy, despite his prejudices, represented access to old pure-blood networks Harry would eventually need to navigate. By Christmas, Harry had established a respectable academic record, a solid social network, and the foundation of what would eventually become a significant business empire. His mail-order service for Muggle-born students had expanded to include wizarding products unavailable in Muggle areas, generating modest but growing profits that he reinvested according to Goblin principles. When most students departed for the holiday, Harry remained at Hogwarts, ostensibly because his guardian was traveling. In reality, he used the relative privacy to explore the castle more thoroughly and investigate the mysterious third-floor corridor Dumbledore had declared off-limits. The discovery of the Philosopher's Stone, hidden behind laughably inadequate protections, confirmed his suspicions that Dumbledore was orchestrating events around him. The stone's presence was too convenient, the defenses too perfectly calibrated for first-year abilities, the whole setup too theatrical to be genuine security. A test, Harry concluded in his report to Ragnok. He's watching to see if I'll take the bait. And will you? The goblin asked. Harry's expression hardened. On my terms, not his. If Voldemort seeks the stone as we suspect, confrontation may be unavoidable. But I refuse to be manipulated into playing the hero on Dumbledore's schedule. Spring term brought new challenges as Harry balanced his various endeavors. His business ventures expanded cautiously, operating through a network of older students who handled distribution in exchange for commissions. His academic performance remained strategically inconsistent, brilliant in some areas, merely competent in others, to avoid drawing excessive attention. Most importantly, he continued gathering information about the various power structures within magical Britain, preparing for the day he would need to navigate them independently. The Philosopher's Stone situation developed as Harry had predicted. Professor Quirrell, whom Harry had identified as suspicious within days of arrival, grew increasingly erratic as the term progressed. Harry monitored the third-floor corridor discreetly, using detection spells the goblins had taught him to track magical signatures. When Quirrell finally made his move during the end-of-year exams, Harry was prepared. He alerted Hermione and Ron with carefully crafted half-truths, convinced them of the urgency, and led them through the obstacle course Dumbledore had arranged. The confrontation with Voldemort's shade, however, proved more dangerous than anticipated. As Quirrell removed his turban to reveal the grotesque face embedded in his skull, Harry felt his scar erupt with searing pain. "Harry Potter," the high, cold voice hissed. "See what I have become because of you. Mere shadow and vapor, forced to possess another's body." Harry fought through the pain, mentally reciting the goblin meditation techniques Ragnok had taught him. "You did this to yourself, Voldemort," he replied steadily. "When you chose to attack innocence." The possessed professor lunged forward with unexpected speed. "Give me the stone. I know you have it." Harry dodged, drawing his wand. The silver-threaded Rowan remained hidden in his secure trunk, he wouldn't reveal his true wand for this confrontation. Instead, He relied on the holly and phoenix feather wand Ollivander had provided, channeling just enough power to seem impressive but not suspicious. Flipendo. He cast, sending Quirrell stumbling backward. It was a standard first-year spell, but executed with precision. Fool! Seize him! Voldemort commanded, and Quirrell charged again. When their skin made contact, the unexpected protection in Harry's blood activated. Quirrell screamed as his flesh blistered and burned. Harry, recognizing the advantage, pressed his hands to his attacker's face deliberately, ignoring the excruciating pain in his scar. As Quirrell collapsed and Voldemort's shade fled, Harry allowed himself to sink toward unconsciousness. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Dumbledore's concerned face bending over him, exactly as the old wizard had planned all along. He manipulated the entire situation, Harry explained to Ragnok from the privacy of his home in the lower levels of Gringotts. Summer had brought welcome respite from the constant performance required at Hogwarts. The stone, the protections, even my confrontation with Quirrell, all orchestrated to test me. And did you pass his test? Ragnok inquired, examining the reports of Harry's first year with keen interest. Precisely as intended, Harry confirmed with a slight smile. I displayed courage, resourcefulness, and just enough magical talent to be impressive without raising suspicion. Dumbledore believes his weapon is developing nicely. And your true progress? Harry set aside his teacup and stood, extending his hand palm up. Without wand or incantation, he conjured a complex illusion of Hogwarts Castle, complete with moving figures and magical auras. My wandless control has improved significantly, he reported as the illusion rotated above his palm. The ambient magic at Hogwarts provides excellent practice conditions. And my financial ventures yielded 16% returns in the first quarter. Ragnok nodded approvingly. The elders wish to see you. Your performance has impressed them, particularly your restraint during the Voldemort confrontation. The meeting with the council proved illuminating. The ancient goblins had monitored Harry's progress closely through their extensive intelligence network, including several portraits at Hogwarts enchanted to report to Gringotts rather than the headmaster. The Dark Wizard will return more powerful, Ragnok predicted, his rheumy eyes fixed on some distant vision. Your paths are entwined by prophecy and blood. But remember, young Potter, prophecies tell outcomes, not methods. How you defeat him remains your choice. I understand, Harry replied, bowing respectfully. I will not be Dumbledore's sacrificial weapon. Indeed not, agreed another elder. You will be the blade that carves a new future for both our peoples. The summer passed quickly as Harry divided his time between intensive training, expanding his business interests, and preparing for his second year. By mid-August, he had established a small import-export enterprise operating through Gringotts, capitalizing on price differentials between magical communities in different countries. His return to Hogwarts brought new challenges in the form of Gilderoy Lockhart and the Chamber of Secrets mystery. Harry navigated both with careful precision, maintaining his public persona while privately investigating the attacks. The discovery that Ginny Weasley was being possessed by a diary containing Voldemort's memory fragment alarmed him deeply, not just for the immediate danger, but for what it suggested about Voldemort's methods of immortality. A container for a soul fragment, he explained to Ragnok via mirror after destroying the diary and saving Ginny. The goblins have legends of such magic, don't they? Ragnok's expression turned grave. Horcruxes. The darkest of magics. If Voldemort created one, he may have created others, Harry finished. Which means destroying his body isn't enough. This complicates matters significantly, Ragnok acknowledged. I will consult our lore masters. In the meantime, maintain your course. Your performance against the basilisk has further cemented your heroic reputation. Harry nodded, though privately he felt frustrated by the necessity of his public role. Playing the brave Gryffindor hero served his long-term goals, but the constraints it placed on his actions sometimes chafed. Third year brought unexpected complications in the form of Sirius Black's escape from Azkaban. Harry, already aware of his godfather's likely innocence through goblin intelligence, faced the challenge of helping Black without revealing his own unusual knowledge or connections. The situation was further complicated by the presence of Remus Lupin, a direct connection to his parents and a potential ally or obstacle, depending on his loyalties. "Professor Lupin genuinely cares for you," Hermione observed as they left Defense Against the Dark Arts one afternoon. Her perceptiveness had only sharpened over the years, though Harry had successfully deflected most of her questions about his background. "He watches you when he thinks no one notices." "He was friends with my father," Harry replied, sharing a truth that was already common knowledge. "I suppose he's curious about how I turned out." "It's more than that," Hermione insisted. "He seems protective. And sad, sometimes, when he looks at you." Harry had noticed this as well. Lupin's presence represented both opportunity and risk, someone who knew his parents intimately but was also deeply connected to Dumbledore. Balancing these factors required delicate handling. When Sirius finally made contact through the mysterious appearance of a firebolt broom at Christmas, actually arranged by Harry through Gringotts, Harry carefully orchestrated events to bring Sirius, Lupin, and the truth about Peter Pettigrew together. The confrontation in the Shrieking Shack required all his diplomatic skills to manage, calming Sirius's volatile temper, reassuring Lupin's cautious nature, and maintaining his own facade of shocked discovery rather than calculated intervention. The subsequent escape of Pettigrew was genuinely disappointing but ultimately manageable. Sirius's freedom from the Dementors, facilitated by a time-turner adventure that Harry guided Hermione towards suggesting, provided him with a valuable ally outside Dumbledore's direct control. "Your godfather could become a significant asset," Ragnok observed when Harry reported these developments. "The Black family wealth combined with his legal status as your guardian would strengthen your position considerably." "If his name can be cleared," Harry agreed. "I'm exploring options through Susan Bones's connection to her aunt. And I've begun hinting to Hermione about the unfairness of his situation without trial. Her sense of justice makes her a powerful advocate." By the end of third year, Harry had expanded his network considerably. Sirius, though still in hiding, provided a direct line to the old pure-blood world that had previously been accessible only through classmates. Lupin offered insights into his parents' lives that the Goblins' factual records couldn't provide. And his business ventures had grown from school-based enterprises to genuine commercial operations generating substantial revenue. "You've laid solid foundations," Griphook commented during Harry's return to Gringotts for the summer. "But the coming year will test your adaptability. Our sources indicate unusual activities at the Ministry." "The Triwizard Tournament," Harry confirmed. "I've heard rumors through various channels. Supposedly cancelled due to the death toll, but being revived as a diplomatic initiative." "Indeed. And Dumbledore will surely find a way to involve you, prophecy-marked as you are." Harry's expression hardened. "I expect nothing less. But this time, I'll be prepared to turn his manipulations to my advantage." The announcement of the Triwizard Tournament at the start of fourth year surprised no one in Harry's inner circle. He had briefed his closest allies, now including Neville, Hermione, and selectively, the Weasley twins, on what to expect, though he carefully presented the information as educated guesses rather than insider knowledge. "International magical cooperation," Dumbledore proclaimed to the assembled students. "A chance to establish ties with our fellow schools, Beauxbatons and Durmstrang." Harry listened with polite attention while mentally calculating the potential opportunities such connections might offer. His import business could benefit significantly from direct relationships with international students. The arrival of the foreign delegations in October created exactly the distraction Harry needed to advance several projects simultaneously. While the school buzzed with excitement over the selection process, he quietly established contact with key Beauxbatons and Durmstrang students, offering favorable exchange rates and exclusive products through his now well-established commercial network. "You never stop working, do you?" Hermione observed one evening as Harry reviewed ledgers disguised as transfiguration notes. "What exactly are you building, Harry?" He looked up, momentarily considering how much to reveal. Over 3 years, Hermione had earned his trust repeatedly, keeping his secrets and supporting his ambitions even when she didn't fully understand them. Perhaps it was time for greater transparency. Financial independence, he answered honestly. And eventually, the influence to change things that need changing. Like what? She pressed. Like the treatment of magical beings. The corruption in the ministry. The stagnation of wizarding society. He met her eyes directly. The world that allowed an innocent man like Sirius to be imprisoned without trial, that treats werewolves like Lupin as less than human, that ignores the wisdom of goblins and elves because of prejudice. Hermione studied him with growing comprehension. That's why you're different. You don't think like other wizards. No, Harry agreed. I don't. Before he could elaborate, the great hall erupted in commotion. The Goblet of Fire had made its selections, Victor Krum for Durmstrang, Fleur Delacour for Beauxbatons, and Cedric Diggory for Hogwarts. Then, impossibly but predictably, a fourth name emerged from the flames, Harry Potter. The moment Harry had anticipated for months had arrived. As whispers and accusations filled the hall, he maintained a carefully crafted expression of shock and confusion. Dumbledore's plan, for Harry had no doubt the headmaster had engineered this surprise, was unfolding exactly as expected. I didn't put my name in, he stated firmly when called forward, injecting just enough indignation into his voice to be convincing. I don't want to compete. The ensuing arguments between school heads, ministry officials, and professors proceeded exactly as Harry had predicted. The magical contract was binding. He had no choice but to participate in a tournament designed for students 3 years his senior. Later that night, alone in a secluded corner of the Gryffindor common room, Hermione found him staring contemplatively into the fire. You knew this would happen, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Harry looked up at her, making a split-second decision. Yes. How? Information has value, Hermione. I've spent years developing sources throughout the wizarding world. She sat beside him, processing this revelation. Is that what your business is really about? Information gathering? Partly, he admitted. Gold is power in one form. Knowledge is power in another. I collect both. For what purpose? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Harry turned to face her fully. To survive what's coming. Voldemort isn't gone, Hermione. The diary proved that. He's finding ways to return, and when he does, I refuse to be an unprepared pawn in someone else's game, whether that someone is Voldemort or Dumbledore. The truth hung between them, more honest than anything he'd shared with anyone outside Gringotts. Hermione's response would determine whether his instincts about her had been correct. After a long moment, she nodded. What do you need me to do? Relief and gratitude washed through him. Help me prepare for these tasks. And keep asking questions, you see things others miss. I can do that, she agreed, then hesitated. But Harry, someday I want the whole truth. About your guardian, about where you really grew up. Everything. When this tournament is over, he promised. If you still want to know then, I'll tell you. The first task revealed the true danger of the tournament. Dragons, specifically nesting mother dragons, among the most aggressive magical creatures in existence. Harry's research had prepared him for numerous possibilities, but the reality still gave him pause. They've lost their minds, Sirius growled through the communication mirror the night before the task. His godfather's face, though still gaunt from Azkaban, had filled out somewhat during months of freedom. Dragons for 14-year-olds? Even with the age restriction, this would be criminally dangerous. It's deliberate, Harry replied calmly. The entire tournament is designed as spectacle, not education. My inclusion doubly so. Are you sure about your strategy? I could teach you the conjunctivitis curse. James would have. No, Harry interrupted firmly. Attacking the dragon directly would be foolish. I've prepared an alternative approach. His plan, developed with input from both Hermione and his goblin advisors, emphasized efficiency over spectacle. While other champions might showcase combat prowess, Harry would demonstrate something more valuable, the ability to achieve objectives without unnecessary conflict. When he entered the arena the following day, facing the Hungarian Horntail, Harry implemented his strategy with precision. First, a disillusionment charm, advanced magic for a fourth year but not impossibly so. Then, while partially concealed, he transfigured several rocks into reflective surfaces, creating strategic distractions around the arena. As the dragon's attention divided between these moving reflections, Harry cast the key spell, Somnus Momentarium, a modified sleep charm developed by combining goblin rune magic with traditional wizard incantations. It wouldn't render the dragon fully unconscious, that would require far more power, but would induce a momentary daze. The 3-second window was all he needed. Darting forward, he claimed the golden egg and retreated before the dragon recovered its full awareness. The crowd's reaction was mixed, some impressed by his efficiency, others disappointed by the lack of dramatic confrontation. The judges awarded respectable but not exceptional scores, exactly as Harry had anticipated. Brilliant strategy, Hermione enthused afterward. Minimal risk, maximum efficiency. Bit boring though, mate, Ron commented. Their friendship had recovered after a brief strain following Harry's selection. No offense, but Crumb's conjunctivitis attack was more exciting. I wasn't trying to be exciting, Harry replied mildly. Just effective. This philosophy guided his approach to the second task as well. The riddle of the golden egg, deciphered with help from Hermione and, secretly, a translation spell the goblins had developed for underwater negotiations, revealed an underwater rescue mission in the Black Lake. While other champions explored complex transfigurations or charm work, Harry implemented a simpler solution combining Muggle diving principles with magical adaptations. A bubblehead charm modified with pressure equalization features allowed him to descend safely, while warming charms prevented hypothermia. The real innovation came in his propulsion method, enchanted flippers that responded to his magical signature, accelerating his movement without requiring constant spell maintenance. This allowed him to conserve magical energy for potential threats. Finding Hermione tied among the hostages produced a moment of genuine emotion that cut through his calculated approach. Seeing her suspended in apparent lifelessness, hair floating eerily in the dark water, Harry felt a surge of protectiveness beyond strategic considerations. Their friendship had deepened into something more complex over the past months, a partnership of minds that increasingly felt essential rather than merely advantageous. He freed her efficiently, but the care with which he guided her to the surface reflected more than tournament strategy. When they broke through to air and she gasped back to consciousness, his relief was entirely authentic. "You were worried," she observed later, wrapped in blankets beside him on the shore. "Even though you knew it was just a task." Harry didn't deny it. "Knowledge doesn't always override emotion," he admitted. "Seeing you down there. I didn't like it." Something shifted in her expression, a softening, a recognition. "That's the most human thing I've ever heard you say." The comment unsettled him more than he expected. Had his careful self-control made him seem inhuman to those closest to him? The goblin values of restraint and strategic thinking had served him well, but perhaps they had also created distance he hadn't intended. This reflection lingered as he prepared for the final task. The maze represented the culmination of Dumbledore's elaborate test, and likely, given the pattern of escalating danger, the moment when Voldemort would make his move. Harry's intelligence network, now extending through students in all 4 houses and supplemented by Sirius's underground contacts, had identified unusual activity around the tournament. The defense professor, Moody, demonstrated behavioral inconsistencies that suggested polyjuice use. Ministry preparations included unusual port key authorizations. All signs pointed to an imminent crisis. "It's a trap," he informed Ragnok through their secure communication. "The cup itself will likely be a port key." "To what destination?" the Goblin director asked. "Unknown. But given Voldemort's theatrical nature, somewhere significant to his resurrection ritual." A family graveyard, perhaps, or a site of previous power. Ragnok's expression turned grave. You could withdraw from the tournament. And reveal how much I know. No. Harry shook his head firmly. Better to spring the trap deliberately and control the outcome. The risk is considerable, Ragnok warned. Even with your training, you are still physically 14. If Voldemort achieves corporeal form, I'll have contingencies, Harry assured him. Including this. He held up a small silver amulet inscribed with goblin runes. Emergency port key keyed to my blood. Activation word is sanctuary, in gobbledygook. The night before the third task, Harry gathered his closest allies, Hermione, Neville, and reluctantly, Ron, to share partial information about his suspicions. The tournament isn't what it seems, he explained in the privacy of an unused classroom warded against eavesdropping. Someone's been interfering from the beginning, and I believe the final task is where their plan culminates. You think it's you-know-who, don't you? Hermione asked quietly. Or his supporters, Harry confirmed. Either way, I need you all to be prepared. If something happens to me during the task, if I disappear or act strangely afterward, contact Sirius immediately using this. He handed Hermione a small mirror matching the one he carried. Ron looked pale but determined. Shouldn't we tell Dumbledore your suspicions? I've left anonymous tips with several professors, Harry lied smoothly. But we can't be certain who to trust completely. As they disbanded, Hermione lingered behind. There's more you're not telling us, she stated. Yes. You're planning to let yourself be taken, aren't you? To see what happens. Harry studied her perceptive face, impressed despite himself. What makes you think that? Because it's what you do, she said simply. You calculate risks and turn traps to your advantage. But Harry, her voice caught. This isn't a business transaction. If it really is Voldemort. I'll be careful, he promised, touched by her concern. On impulse, he added, when this is over, Hermione, I want to show you something. A place that's important to me. She blinked in surprise. Your real home? Yes. Where I really grew up. The admission felt right, despite years of secrecy. Whatever happened in the maze tomorrow, Harry had come to realize that allies like Hermione, who saw him clearly yet stood by him anyway, were assets beyond mere strategic value. They were essential to the future he hoped to build. The maze unfolded much as Harry had anticipated, dangerous obstacles designed to test courage and magical skill while appearing fair. He navigated them methodically, avoiding unnecessary confrontations and conserving energy for what he suspected would follow. When he and Cedric reached the cup simultaneously, Harry made a split-second decision. His intelligence suggested the cup was port-keyed to transport a single champion. Taking it alone would contain the threat to himself, sharing it might endanger Cedric unnecessarily. You take it, he told the older boy. You reached it first. That's not true, Cedric objected. You saved me from that acromantula. We should take it together, a Hogwarts victory either way. Harry hesitated, weighing options rapidly. Refusing too strenuously would seem suspicious. Perhaps a controlled scenario with Cedric was manageable, it would provide a witness to whatever followed, assuming they both survived. Together, then, he agreed, extending his hand. Their fingers closed around the cup's handles simultaneously, and the familiar hook behind the navel confirmed Harry's prediction, a port key, yanking them away from Hogwarts protections to an unknown destination. They landed hard in a dark graveyard, exactly the theatrical setting Harry had anticipated for Voldemort's resurrection ritual. Ancient headstones loomed around them, and a small church stood silhouetted against the night sky. Is this part of the task? Cedric asked, raising his wand cautiously. No, Harry replied, already scanning for threats. It's a trap. Get back to the cup, Cedric. Now. Before Cedric could move, a high voice called from the darkness, kill the spare. Avada Kedavra. Green light erupted from the shadows. Harry, operating on instinct and training, shoved Cedric aside with brutal force. The killing curse missed by inches, striking a headstone that exploded into fragments. "Run!" Harry commanded, firing stunning spells toward their attacker, a short, hunched figure Harry recognized from descriptions as Peter Pettigrew. Cedric scrambled toward the cup, but Pettigrew was already casting again. Crucio. Harry deflected the torture curse with a goblin-taught shield variant, then counterattacked with precise disarming and binding spells. His true wand, the silver-threaded Rowan with its goblin blood core, remained concealed, but even with his official wand, Harry's combat training showed in his efficient movements. The boy shows unexpected skill. Wormtail, came a high, cold voice from a bundle in Pettigrew's arms. But it changes nothing. Proceed. What followed was a nightmarish ritual that Harry had prepared for intellectually but found sickening to witness. Bone from the father, forcibly taken blood from the enemy, despite Harry's resistance, flesh willingly given, Pettigrew's own hand, severed in screaming sacrifice. Then, from the bubbling cauldron, rose a figure that embodied the darkness Harry had been training to confront since age 2, Lord Voldemort, restored to physical form. Tall, skeletal, with gleaming red eyes and skin like waxy parchment, he examined his new body with evident satisfaction. "Robe me, Wormtail," he commanded, ignoring his servants whimpering over his bleeding stump. Harry used these moments to assess his options. Cedric had apparently reached the portkey and escaped, one small victory. The graveyard contained approximately a dozen Death Eaters arriving via apparition, responding to Voldemort's summons through their dark marks. Direct combat against such odds was inadvisable. His emergency portkey remained concealed against his skin, but using it immediately would forfeit valuable intelligence. Better to gather information first, then escape strategically. "Harry Potter," Voldemort addressed him finally, turning those terrible red eyes upon him. "I confess myself disappointed. I expected the boy who vanquished me to show greater resistance." Harry remained silent, conserving energy while appearing appropriately terrified. Let Voldemort underestimate him. "Nothing to say?" Voldemort mocked. "No pleas for mercy? Your parents begged, you know. Your father tried to fight, foolishly, without even his wand. Your mother screamed most pleasingly before the end." The taunts were calculated to provoke emotional response, to make him angry, careless. Harry recognized the tactic and maintained his composure, though genuine anger simmered beneath his controlled exterior. "Perhaps you require motivation to participate," Voldemort continued. Crucio. The pain was beyond anything Harry had experienced, beyond what training could prepare him for. Every nerve ignited in agony, driving rational thought from his mind. When it finally lifted, he found himself on the ground, breath coming in harsh gasps. "Now, Harry Potter, you will duel me," Voldemort declared. "Stand and face your death like a man, like your father died. Or cower like a child, it matters not." Wormtail roughly untied Harry and thrust his wand back into his hand. The Death Eaters formed a circle around them, an audience for their master's triumph. Harry rose slowly, appearing weakened while mentally preparing his strategy. He needed to appear adequately skilled to make his eventual escape believable, but not so capable as to reveal his true training. A delicate balance. "We bow before dueling, Harry," Voldemort instructed, bending slightly in mocking courtesy. "Dumbledore would want you to show manners." Harry inclined his head fractionally, never taking his eyes off his opponent. When Voldemort attacked, Harry was ready, dodging rather than blocking the first curse. Expelliarmus, he cast, deliberately choosing a simple, expected spell. Avada Kedavra. Voldemort countered. The spells collided in midair, producing an unexpected phenomenon, a golden thread connecting their wands, vibrating with energy. Priori incantatem, Harry recognized from his studies. The brother wand effect. The connection erupted into a golden web surrounding them, isolating them from the watching Death Eaters. Beads of light formed on the connecting thread, moving toward Harry's wand as Voldemort poured his greater power into forcing them back. This was an unexpected development, but potentially advantageous. Harry concentrated, drawing on his goblin-trained magical discipline to push the beads gradually toward Voldemort's wand instead. When the first bead made contact with the wand's tip, ghostly figures began to emerge, victims of Voldemort's recent spells. First Cedric, not dead after all, but injured and unconscious when he'd used the portkey to escape. Then an old man Harry didn't recognize. And finally, the figures he'd both anticipated and dreaded, his parents. "Hold on, son," his father's shade encouraged him. "Your mother's coming." When Lily Potter's form emerged, Harry felt a surge of emotion pierce through his carefully maintained control. Her eyes, so like his own, regarded him with fierce love. "We're so proud of you, Harry," she whispered. "So proud of the strong young man you've become. When you break the connection, we can linger just moments to cover your escape. Get back to the portkey." "I love you," Harry managed, his voice thick with suppressed feeling. "We love you too," his father replied. "Now get ready, go." Harry severed the connection with a sharp movement, and the ghostly figures swarmed Voldemort, temporarily obscuring his vision. Using the momentary advantage, Harry sprinted toward a large angel statue and took cover behind it, firing precisely aimed stunning spells at the nearest Death Eaters. Chaos erupted as Voldemort bellowed commands and curses filled the air. Harry used the confusion to work his way methodically toward the cup, maintaining cover and creating strategic distractions with well-placed blasting curses against headstones. When he finally reached touching distance of the portkey, Harry made a calculated decision. This confrontation had provided critical intelligence. Voldemort was corporeal again, gathering his forces, but unprepared for a target who fought strategically rather than emotionally. "Accio Cup," he called, simultaneously activating a blinding flash charm to cover his departure. As the portkey yanked him back to Hogwarts, Harry glimpsed Voldemort's furious face through the fading light, the face of an enemy who had underestimated him once, but would not make that mistake again. Harry's return to Hogwarts triggered precisely the political chaos he had anticipated. Cedric's testimony about the graveyard attack supported Harry's account, but Minister Fudge steadfastly refused to acknowledge Voldemort's return. The resulting tension created both challenges and opportunities. "A temporarily divided enemy is advantageous," Ragnok observed during their first meeting after Harry's return to Gringotts for the summer. "While Voldemort rebuilds in secret and the Ministry remains in denial, you have space to consolidate your position." "My thoughts exactly," Harry agreed. "I've already begun restructuring my holdings in preparation for economic instability." And Sirius's case has gained unexpected traction due to Pettigrew's public reappearance during the third task. The weeks following the tournament proved transformative in multiple ways. Sirius, finally granted a proper trial through Amelia Bones's intervention, was formally exonerated and recognized as Harry's legal guardian. This development, orchestrated carefully through Harry's political connections, provided a crucial public-facing protection for his true residence at Gringotts. More significantly, Harry had finally fulfilled his promise to Hermione. After extensive security precautions and a binding magical oath of secrecy, he had brought her to the lower levels of Gringotts and revealed the truth of his upbringing. Her reaction had progressed from shock to fascination to understanding as he explained how the goblins had rescued him from the Dursleys and raised him according to their customs. "It explains so much," she'd said finally, watching a young goblin demonstrate metallurgy techniques in one of the training halls. "Your approach to everything, money, knowledge, even friendship. You've been balancing two worlds all along." "Three, technically," Harry had corrected. "Goblin, wizard, and muggle. Each has strengths the others lack, perspectives the others need." Hermione had turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "Is that your goal, then? Bringing these worlds together somehow?" Harry had considered her question carefully before answering. "Not integration, that would destroy what makes each unique. But cooperation. Mutual respect. Recognition of complementary strengths." He paused, then added, the goblins have a concept called Harnak Vor, strength in different metals. The strongest blade contains not one pure element but several different metals in precise balance. And you want to be the smith who forges that blade, Hermione had concluded, understanding dawning in her eyes. Not alone, Harry had replied, meeting her gaze directly. I'll need partners who understand the vision. The moment had stretched between them, weighted with unspoken possibility. Then Hermione had smiled, taking his hand firmly in hers. Where do we start? Now, as his 14th summer drew to a close, Harry stood at the edge of Gringotts' uppermost balcony, looking out over Diagon Alley. Below, witches and wizards went about their business, blissfully unaware of the forces gathering on all sides, Voldemort in the shadows, Dumbledore in his tower, the Ministry in its chambers of denial, and Harry himself, the goblin-raised wizard preparing to change everything. Ragnok joined him at the railing, his sharp eyes taking in the same scene. The pieces are moving faster now, the goblin director observed. Voldemort gathers his army. Dumbledore reconstitutes his order. The Ministry buries its head deeper. And we prepare accordingly, Harry finished. The investments are secured. The offshore accounts established. All in place, Ragnok confirmed. When financial panic strikes, as it inevitably will once Voldemort makes his public move, our positions will be perfectly hedged. Gold flowing out of Britain will pass through our fingers, generating significant profit while appearing to be routine transactions. Harry nodded in satisfaction. And the other preparations? The safe houses? The emergency port keys for our allies? Proceeding according to schedule. The black properties have proven particularly useful after Sirius granted you access. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, goblin and wizard united in purpose. Then Ragnok spoke again, his tone uncharacteristically reflective. When Ragnok first saw you in his vision, I thought only of protecting Gringotts' assets. I did not anticipate. He paused, searching for words uncommon in goblin discourse. I did not anticipate how your presence would change us as well. Harry turned to his mentor in surprise. How have I changed the goblins? You have reminded us that isolation, while secure, limits growth. That engagement, carefully managed, creates opportunity. Ragnok's sharp teeth gleamed in a rare smile. And that sometimes, the most valuable assets are not gold or gems, but connections between different worlds. As the sun set over Diagon Alley, Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the goblin raised, the future king of two worlds, contemplated the challenges ahead. Voldemort would move openly soon. Dumbledore would intensify his own plans for Harry. The Ministry would eventually face reality, probably too late to prepare adequately. But Harry had been preparing since age 2. He had wealth most wizards couldn't comprehend, knowledge few could match, and allies in places his enemies would never expect. Most importantly, he had a vision beyond mere survival or victory, a vision of a world where strength came from diversity rather than purity, from cooperation rather than dominance. We have work to do, he told Ragnok, turning from the view with renewed purpose. The game is changing, and we need to change the rules. Chapter 3, The King Rises. 5th year at Hogwarts dawned beneath a sky heavy with unspoken threats. The Ministry's official position, that Voldemort had not returned, that Harry Potter and Cedric Diggory were confused or attention-seeking, cast a pall over what should have been a triumphant homecoming. As the Hogwarts Express pulled away from platform 9 3/4, Harry sat in a compartment surrounded by the inner circle he now privately thought of as his war council. The Daily Prophet called you unstable again, Neville noted, folding the newspaper with disgust. His confidence had grown considerably over the past year, bolstered by Harry's quiet mentorship and his own blossoming magical abilities. Let them, Harry replied, his attention focused on a ledger disguised as a Quidditch magazine. Public opinion is a pendulum. When Voldemort shows himself openly, they'll swing from denial to panic, and that's when prepared people become valuable. Hermione, seated beside him, nodded in understanding. Since her visit to Gringotts over the summer, her perspective had shifted dramatically. The revelation of Harry's goblin upbringing had contextualized his approach to power and influence in ways that aligned with her own pragmatic intelligence. The Ministry's sending someone to Hogwarts, she reminded them. Sirius's contacts confirmed it yesterday. Dolores Umbridge, Harry confirmed without looking up from his ledger. Senior Undersecretary to the Minister and architect of anti-werewolf legislation that nearly destroyed Lupin financially last year. Ron whistled low. Your information network is scary sometimes, mate. Harry smiled slightly but didn't elaborate on his sources, a combination of goblin intelligence, Sirius's underworld connections, and his own carefully cultivated relationships throughout the wizarding world. What's the plan for her? Neville asked, lowering his voice despite the privacy wards Harry had established around their compartment. Observation first, Harry replied, finally setting aside his financial records. She represents the Ministry's attempt to control the Hogwarts narrative. Countering her effectively requires understanding her specific approach. And in the meantime? Hermione prompted, already knowing the answer but wanting the others to hear it directly. Harry's expression hardened with quiet determination. In the meantime, we accelerate our preparations. Voldemort's gathering strength while the Ministry buries its head. We don't have the luxury of waiting for adults to act sensibly. The others nodded, each understanding their role in what had evolved from a friendship into something more purposeful. Ron's strategic mind and extensive family connections complemented Neville's growing confidence and pure-blood knowledge. Hermione's brilliant analytical abilities tied everything together, while Harry provided the vision and resources that gave their efforts direction. There's something else, Harry added, his tone shifting subtly. I'll be 15 in July, which means I can claim the Potter Regency. Full lordship comes at 17, but the Regency grants access to family vault resources beyond my trust fund. That's huge, Neville said, eyes widening. The Potter family magic is legendary. My gran says your father could transfigure things most wizards couldn't even imagine. It's not just magic, Harry explained. It's political capital. The Potter seat on the Wisengamot has been dormant since my parents died. Claiming the Regency allows me to appoint a proxy. Serious? Ron guessed. Too controversial still, despite his exoneration. Harry shook his head. I'm considering your father, Neville, if he's willing. Augusta Longbottom commands respect across the political spectrum. As the train rumbled northward, they discussed strategies and contingencies, unaware that this year would test their planning in ways none of them anticipated. Outside their warded compartment, the wizarding world teetered on the edge of transformation, a transformation Harry intended to guide rather than merely survive. Professor Umbridge was worse than Harry's intelligence had suggested. Her saccharine voice and pink cardigans concealed a vicious commitment to Ministry dominance that manifested in increasingly draconian educational decrees. She's not just suppressing the truth about Voldemort, Hermione observed during a clandestine meeting in the Room of Requirement in late September. She's systematically dismantling Hogwarts' educational independence. Harry nodded, his expression grave as he surveyed the students gathered around them. What had begun as a small study group had expanded into something more substantial, students from all four houses united by concern about Umbridge's refusal to teach practical defense. The Ministry fears Dumbledore's influence, he explained to the assembled group. They believe he's training students as a private army. That's mental, Dean Thomas objected. Why would Dumbledore need an army? To overthrow the Ministry, according to Fudge's paranoia, Harry replied. The irony is, by preventing us from learning defensive magic during Voldemort's return, they're creating exactly the kind of instability they fear. So what do we do? Asked Susan Bones, her aunt's position in the DMLE making her particularly valuable to Harry's information network. Harry paced before them, considering how much to reveal. These students trusted him based on his public reputation, the boy who lived, the Triwizard champion, not knowing the calculated years of preparation behind his apparent confidence. We create an alternative, he said finally. A student defense association that teaches what Umbridge won't. The room buzzed with nervous excitement at the suggestion. That's breaking about a dozen school rules, Zacharias Smith pointed out. Not to mention Umbridge's decrees. Sometimes systems must be circumvented when they fail their purpose, Harry countered, unconsciously echoing Goblin philosophy. Hogwarts exists to prepare us for the magical world. If the institution temporarily fails that mission due to political interference, we adapt. His calm logic swayed even the skeptics. By meeting's end, everyone had signed the enchanted parchment Hermione had prepared, a magically binding agreement that prevented disclosure of their activities. As the students filtered out in small groups to avoid detection, Hermione lingered behind with Harry. That wasn't just about defense lessons, she observed once they were alone. You're building a network. Harry smiled, impressed by her perception. Multiple purposes serve efficiency. Yes, these students need defensive training. They also represent future connections in every sector of magical society, ministry families, business heirs, international links. Planning beyond Voldemort already, she noted, neither approving nor condemning, simply understanding. The true threat has never been just Voldemort, Harry explained, dismantling the room's transfigurations with casual wandless magic now that they were alone. It's the system that created him, that allowed him to gain power, that failed to recognize the warning signs. Defeating him means little if that system remains unchanged. Hermione studied him thoughtfully. The goblins taught you to think in centuries, didn't they? Not just immediate victories. Precisely, Harry confirmed. Ragnok calls it seven-generation thinking. Every significant decision should consider impacts 3 generations back and 3 forward. It's a heavy responsibility, she said softly. Harry paused in his work, turning to face her directly. In the room's gentle light, he allowed himself a rare moment of complete honesty. Sometimes I wonder if I'm worthy of it. My parents didn't raise me to be a revolutionary. Hermione stepped closer, her expression solemn. No, but the goblins raised you to be a leader. And from everything you've told me about Lily and James Potter, I think they'd be proud of how you're using that training. Something shifted between them in that moment, a deepening of understanding, a recognition of shared purpose that transcended their already strong friendship. Without conscious thought, Harry reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining with natural ease. We should get back, he said after a moment, though he made no move to leave. Curfew soon. Yes, Hermione agreed, equally motionless. When they finally did return to Gryffindor Tower, something fundamental had changed, a quiet acknowledgement that whatever future Harry was building, Hermione would be central to it. The Defense Association, which students had begun calling Dumbledore's Army, despite Harry's private misgivings about the name, flourished throughout the autumn term. Harry's teaching methods, influenced by Goblin training techniques, emphasized practical application over theory and adaptability over rote memorization. Magical combat isn't about knowing the most spells, he explained during their 4th meeting. It's about using the right spell at the right moment with absolute precision. He demonstrated by dispatching 3 practice dummies with a single, perfectly aimed reductor curse that ricocheted between targets. The students watched in awe, all except Hermione, who recognized the Goblin principle of efficiency in action. While the DA provided valuable defensive training, it served Harry's broader strategy in ways the members couldn't guess. Each session allowed him to identify students with exceptional aptitude, leadership potential, or unique magical abilities that might prove valuable in the coming conflict. He cultivated these relationships carefully, building a network of loyalty and competence that extended beyond house boundaries. Meanwhile, his business ventures had evolved from school-based enterprises into legitimate commercial operations. Working through proxies, primarily former Hogwarts students he'd recruited during their school years, Harry had established a diversified portfolio that included everything from import-export operations to property investments. The Southeast Asian expansion is exceeding projections, Griphook reported during their monthly Mirror conference in November. Particularly the partnership with the Singapore Magical Enclave. Excellent, Harry replied, reviewing the parchment statements his account manager had sent via Secure Owl that morning. And the daily profit investment? We now control 32% of shares through various holding companies, Griphook confirmed. Enough for significant editorial influence without triggering ministry oversight regulations. Harry nodded in satisfaction. The Wizarding World's primary news source had been instrumental in the ministry's campaign against him. Gradually redirecting its reporting would be crucial to shifting public opinion when Voldemort finally showed himself. And the special project, he asked, using their code for his most sensitive initiative. Properties secured in 7 countries, Griphook replied. Untraceable, unplottable, and provisioned as specified. If evacuation becomes necessary, we're prepared. This contingency planning had consumed significant resources, but Harry considered it essential. Should Voldemort take control of Britain as he had nearly done during the First War, Harry needed secure locations to shelter key allies and continue operations from exile if required. As Christmas approached, these preparations gained urgency following Arthur Weasley's attack at the Ministry. The incident, which Harry experienced through an unexpected mental connection to Voldemort, confirmed both the Dark Lord's growing boldness and the vulnerability of Harry's human allies. The connection is concerning, Ragnok observed during Harry's holiday return to Gringotts. Such links can be exploited bidirectionally. Dumbledore wants Snape to teach me a clemency, Harry replied, sipping goblin brewed tea in Ragnok's private chambers. The director's willingness to host him in his personal quarters rather than his office reflected the familial relationship that had developed between them over 13 years. Severus Snape is a skilled occlumens, Ragnok acknowledged, but his teaching methods are questionable, and his ultimate loyalty remains ambiguous. I suggest you continue with the goblin mental disciplines you've already mastered while appearing to struggle with Snape's instruction. Harry nodded, having reached the same conclusion independently. It maintains Dumbledore's perception of my vulnerability while actually strengthening my defenses. They spent the remaining holiday refining Harry's financial and defensive strategies. The Potter Regency, formally claimed on his 15th birthday, had provided access to family grimoires containing centuries of magical knowledge. Combined with Black family resources through Sirius, Harry now controlled magical and financial assets that rivaled the oldest pure-blood families. You've outgrown mere wealth, Ragnok observed during their final meeting before Harry's return to Hogwarts. You're building an empire. Harry smiled slightly. An unusual description for a goblin to use. Your people typically prefer strategic holdings or asset consolidation. Most goblins aren't raising the wizard who will reshape magical Britain, Ragnok replied with uncharacteristic directness. Don't misunderstand, Harry. I remain director of Gringotts first, with all the neutrality that position demands publicly. But you are also my son in all but blood, and I take pride in your accomplishments. The admission, rare from a goblin not given to emotional declarations, caught Harry off guard. Thank you, he said simply, knowing Ragnok would understand the depth of feeling behind those inadequate words. Harry's return to Hogwarts coincided with Voldemort's first public move, a mass breakout from Azkaban that the Ministry unconvincingly attributed to Sirius despite his formal exoneration months earlier. He's gathering his inner circle, Harry explained to the DA leadership during an emergency meeting. Bellatrix Lestrange, Antonin Dolohov, Augustus Rookwood, these aren't ordinary Death Eaters. They're his elite. What's he waiting for? Neville asked, his face tight with anger at the mention of Bellatrix, who had tortured his parents into insanity. Maximum psychological impact, Harry replied. Every day of government denial weakens public confidence. When he finally moves openly, the shock and betrayal will magnify the terror. Classic psychological warfare, Hermione added. When people learn they've been systematically lied to by authorities, they become resistant to further official guidance, even when it's valid. The room fell silent as the students absorbed the implications. They were preparing not just for magical combat but for the collapse of institutions they'd been raised to trust. So we're it, Ginny Weasley said finally. The only ones actually getting ready. Not entirely, Harry corrected. Dumbledore has reconvened the Order of the Phoenix, a resistance group from the First War. And some Aurors are preparing unofficially, despite Ministry directives. But they're not working together, Ron observed with unexpected insight. Everyone's got their own plan, their own secrets. Exactly, Harry confirmed. Which is why our network becomes increasingly important. We need coordination across these isolated groups when Voldemort makes his move. The meeting evolved into a strategy session, with each core member taking responsibility for different aspects of their preparation. Luna Lovegood, whose dreamy exterior concealed a brilliantly unconventional mind, would develop alternative communication methods. The Weasley twins would accelerate production of their magical defense products. Neville would expand their medicinal herb garden for healing supplies. As the term progressed, Harry balanced these defensive preparations with his financial operations and the increasingly demanding OWL curriculum. His time management skills, honed through years of Goblin training, allowed him to maintain exceptional academic performance while simultaneously managing his various enterprises. The breaking point came in June, when a vision of Sirius being tortured at the Department of Mysteries sent Harry and his inner circle racing to London despite Hermione's skepticism about the vision's authenticity. "It's too convenient," she argued as they prepared to depart. "Too specific, after months of vague impressions through your connection." "I know," Harry acknowledged. "It's almost certainly a trap. But even traps provide opportunities for those who enter with open eyes." "You're planning to spring it deliberately?" Hermione asked, her voice a mixture of admiration and concern. Harry nodded, checking his emergency port keys and ensuring his true wand was securely holstered alongside his public one. "Voldemort wants something from the Department of Mysteries, likely the prophecy connecting us. This gives us chance to discover his specific interest while demonstrating our capabilities to both allies and enemies." The 6 students who departed for London that evening were not the frightened teenagers Voldemort anticipated. They were trained, coordinated, and, thanks to Harry's foresight, equipped with goblin-crafted communication devices and defensive talismans. When they arrived at the Department of Mysteries, Harry immediately confirmed what they had suspected: no sign of Sirius, but clear indications of a waiting ambush. Rather than retreating, however, he led them deeper into the labyrinthine department, following the mental pull that had been growing stronger for months. The Hall of Prophecies loomed before them, its endless shelves stretching into darkness. Harry moved unerringly to row 97, where a small glass sphere bore his name alongside Voldemort's. "This is what he wants," Harry said quietly, examining the prophecy without touching it. "The full text of the prediction that connected us. Should we take it?" Neville asked, wand ready as he watched for approaching threats. "No need," Harry replied. "I already know the contents." This wasn't entirely true. He knew the goblin prophecy about him, but not the wizard one Dumbledore had partially shared with Voldemort. Still, letting the Death Eaters believe he possessed this knowledge would create useful uncertainty. As if summoned by his decision, dark shapes materialized at the end of the row, Death Eaters in full regalia, led by Lucius Malfoy. "Very good, Potter," Malfoy drawled, his voice distorted behind his silver mask. "Now hand over the prophecy, and we may let your friends leave intact." Harry smiled slightly, his posture relaxed despite the imminent danger. "I'm afraid I must decline, Lucius. Your master should have sent more persuasive representatives." The casual dismissal had its intended effect. Several Death Eaters shifted angrily, wands twitching with barely restrained violence. "You dare mock the Dark Lord's chosen?" Bellatrix Lestrange hissed from beside Malfoy. "Perhaps we should demonstrate what happens to disrespectful children." "Perhaps you should," Harry replied calmly, then whispered to his companions, "Defense Pattern 3. Now." What followed was not the desperate flight of terrified students but a coordinated fighting retreat that left the Death Eaters increasingly frustrated. Harry's group moved with practiced precision, using prearranged tactics that maximized their mobility while minimizing direct confrontation. "Split and isolate," Harry commanded as they entered the rotating chamber of doors. His companions immediately paired off, Ron with Ginny, Neville with Luna, leaving Harry and Hermione to lead separate Death Eater groups on strategic chases through different department sections. This divide-and-conquer approach prevented the Death Eaters from concentrating their superior numbers, while the students' communication devices allowed them to coordinate their movements toward a predetermined extraction point. When Order members finally arrived, alerted by Snape after Harry had ensured a concerned student reported their disappearance, they found not a massacre of foolish teenagers but a controlled engagement where students were holding their own against experienced dark wizards. The battle intensified with the Order's arrival. Spells flew with increasing lethality as Death Eaters abandoned restraint. In the Veil Room, Sirius dueled Bellatrix with characteristic recklessness, dodging curses by inches. Harry, fighting nearby alongside Lupin, saw the moment Bellatrix's killing curse nearly found its mark, would have found it, if not for the goblin-crafted shield amulet Harry had insisted Sirius wear at all times. The magical backlash sent both Sirius and Bellatrix sprawling, dazed but alive. Before Harry could capitalize on Bellatrix's vulnerability, a cold, palpable darkness filled the chamber. Voldemort himself had arrived, his serpentine face twisted with fury at his followers' failure. "Enough games," the Dark Lord hissed, sending Order members flying with casual waves of his wand. "The prophecy, Potter. Now." Harry faced him calmly, aware that this confrontation, unlike their graveyard meeting, had witnesses from all factions of magical society. "There's nothing in that glass ball that I need, Tom. But apparently, you feel differently." Voldemort's red eyes narrowed at the use of his birth name. "Your defiance grows tiresome. Perhaps a demonstration of the cost." He turned toward Hermione, who stood protectively near an injured Ron, and raised his wand. "Crucio." Voldemort cast with casual cruelty. Harry moved with inhuman speed, drawing not his holly wand but the silver-threaded rowan hidden in his sleeve. The goblin blood core responded to his intent instantly, conjuring a shield of metallic energy that absorbed Voldemort's curse completely. The chamber fell silent at this unexpected display of power. Even Voldemort seemed momentarily taken aback by magic unlike anything a 15-year-old wizard should command. "You will not touch my friends," Harry stated, his voice resonating with authority beyond his years. "You will not harm those under my protection." Before Voldemort could respond, the atrium fireplaces flared green. Ministry officials poured in, led by Minister Fudge himself, arriving just in time to witness the Dark Lord in the flesh. Voldemort, recognizing the strategic defeat, vanished in a swirl of shadow, taking his remaining Death Eaters with him. The damage, however, was done. Dozens of Ministry employees had seen him. The denial was no longer sustainable. In the aftermath, as Auror secured the department and medics attended the injured, Harry found himself face to face with Dumbledore. The ancient wizard studied him with new wariness, his customary twinkle replaced by calculating assessment. "That was not phoenix feather magic you wielded against Voldemort," Dumbledore observed quietly. "No," Harry agreed, offering no further explanation. "I believe we have much to discuss, Harry," the headmaster continued. "About your upbringing, your unusual education, and the prophecy you chose not to claim." "Perhaps," Harry replied noncommittally. "But first, I believe Minister Fudge requires your attention. He seems rather shaken by tonight's revelations." Indeed, Fudge was gesticulating wildly to his aides, his face ashen as the reality he had denied for a year crashed around him. His political future had ended the moment Voldemort appeared before witnesses. As Dumbledore moved to manage the ministerial crisis, Hermione appeared at Harry's side. "You revealed your true wand," she noted. "That changes things." Harry nodded, watching the political drama unfold with calculating eyes. "The time for complete secrecy has passed. Now we enter Phase 2, Controlled Revelation." The wizarding world transformed overnight. Headlines screamed, "HEWHO must not be named returns," while ministry officials scrambled to appear proactive after months of denial. Fudge resigned in disgrace, replaced by Rufus Scrimgeour, former head of the Auror office. Harry, vindicated publicly after a year of character assassination, found himself suddenly courted by the same ministry that had maligned him. Scrimgeour personally requested a meeting during the summer holidays, arriving at a neutral location Harry had specified rather than risking a direct visit to Gringotts. "The public needs reassurance, Mr. Potter," the new minister explained, his leonine face grave. "They need to see that the boy who lived stands with the ministry in these dark times." Harry regarded him thoughtfully. At nearly 16, he projected a presence that made many adults forget his youth, tall for his age, with controlled movements and penetrating green eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they observed. "An interesting proposal," Harry replied. "Particularly given the ministry's recent position that I was an attention-seeking liar." Scrimgeour winced slightly. "Unfortunate misunderstandings during the previous administration. We're prepared to offer formal apologies, of course, and certain accommodations regarding your unique status." "Such as?" Harry prompted, already knowing what would be offered but wanting it stated explicitly. "Exemption from the underage magic restrictions. A security detail if desired. Perhaps a special advisory position with appropriate stipend." The minister leaned forward. "The wizarding world looks to you as a symbol of hope, Mr. Potter. We simply wish to formalize that role." As a ministry spokesperson, Harry clarified. "A mascot to boost morale while actual policy remains unchanged." Scrimgeour's expression hardened slightly. "That's rather cynical for someone your age." "Is it cynical to observe that your proposals involve my public image but not my substantive input? That you're offering symbolic gestures rather than actual authority?" Harry shook his head. "The ministry needs more than new leadership, Minister Scrimgeour. It needs structural reform." "Reform takes time we don't have during wartime," Scrimgeour countered. "On the contrary," Harry replied. "Crisis creates the perfect opportunity for necessary change. I'm prepared to support the ministry publicly, but only a ministry actively addressing its institutional failures." He slid a sealed parchment across the table. "These are my conditions. They include anti-corruption measures, repeal of discriminatory legislation against magical beings, and transparency requirements for departmental operations." Scrimgeour's eyebrows rose as he scanned the document. "This is extraordinarily comprehensive for someone who hasn't completed his OWLs." "I've had excellent advisors," Harry said simply. After further negotiation, they reached a pragmatic compromise. Harry would make limited public appearances supporting general ministry efforts against Voldemort while Scrimgeour would implement a modified version of Harry's proposed reforms. Neither was entirely satisfied, which suggested a fair agreement. As the minister departed, Harry contacted Ragnok via mirror to report the meeting's outcome. "Phase 1 of political realignment complete," he concluded. "The ministry now recognizes my influence as distinct from Dumbledore's." "Excellent," the Goblin replied. "And the Hogwarts situation?" "Evolving," Harry admitted. "Dumbledore has requested a series of private lessons this coming year. I suspect he's finally ready to share critical information about Voldemort. Information you likely already possess through our intelligence network," Ragnok noted with grim amusement. "Partial information," Harry corrected. "Dumbledore has studied Tom Riddle longer than anyone. His insights, however manipulatively delivered, will be valuable." As summer progressed, Harry expanded both his financial empire and his defensive preparations. With Voldemort now operating openly, the wizarding economy had begun to contract. Businesses closed as owners fled the country, property values plummeted in formerly desirable areas, and investment capital dried up as the wealthy secured their assets offshore. Harry, guided by Goblin financial principles, didn't merely weather this contraction, he leveraged it strategically. Through various holding companies and proxies, he acquired distressed businesses at favorable terms, purchased prime properties at fractions of their pre-war values, and positioned himself to control significant portions of the post-war economy. "It feels wrong sometimes," he confided to Hermione during her visit to Grippington Hall, a property he had purchased through the Black Estate to serve as his public residence. profiting from others' fear and misfortune. They sat in the manor's extensive library, surrounded by rare volumes Harry had been collecting since his first year at Hogwarts. Hermione considered his concern thoughtfully before responding. "It would be wrong if you were creating or exploiting the crisis," she said finally. "But you're maintaining economic function when others are abandoning their responsibilities. The alternative is complete collapse." Harry nodded, appreciating her perspective. "That's how Ragnok explains it too. Still, I'm keeping records of all original owners. After the war, they'll have options to rebuy at fair market value if they wish." Hermione smiled, reaching for his hand across the table. "And that's why I don't worry about you becoming just another kind of Dark Lord. Power doesn't corrupt you because you never forget its purpose." Their relationship had deepened over the summer, evolving from intellectual partnership into something more personal. Neither had explicitly defined this transition, but their quiet moments together carried increasing significance. "Have you told your parents about everything?" Harry asked, their entwined fingers a warm anchor between them. "Most of it," Hermione admitted. "They know about Voldemort, about the increasing dangers. I've arranged international port keys for them through your contacts, just in case." "And about us?" Harry prompted gently. Hermione's cheeks colored slightly. "I told them we're exploring possibilities. That you're important to me in ways that transcend friendship." An elegant description, Harry observed with a small smile. Accurate without premature definitions. "Very diplomatic," she agreed, returning his smile. "I learned from the best goblin-raised wizard in Britain." 6th year at Hogwarts marked a turning point in Harry's dual existence. While maintaining his public role as the Chosen One, now acknowledged even in ministry literature, he accelerated his behind-the-scenes consolidation of power. Dumbledore's private lessons proved valuable, though largely confirmatory. The headmaster's revelation about Horcruxes merely gave a name to what Goblin intelligence had already suspected based on the diary Harry had destroyed in 2nd year. The history of Tom Riddle's transformation into Lord Voldemort filled important gaps in their understanding of his psychology and methods. "He fears death above all else," Harry explained to his inner circle, which now included select DA members along with his original friends. They met in the Room of Requirement, which Harry had enhanced with goblin security measures beyond anything Hogwarts typically supported. Every Horcrux represents his desperate attempt to anchor himself to existence, regardless of the cost. "How many do you think he made?" Neville asked, his confidence now matching his considerable magical power. Under Harry's guidance, he had developed into a formidable wizard in his own right. Dumbledore believed 6, creating 7 soul fragments including the piece in his current body, Harry replied. The diary was 1. He's identified a ring belonging to Riddle's grandfather as another, which he destroyed last summer. That's why his hand is injured. "And the others?" Luna inquired, her dreamy voice belying her sharp intelligence. "We have strong suspicions," Harry said. "Objects of significance to Hogwarts founders, primarily. A locket belonging to Slytherin. A cup from Hufflepuff. Possibly something of Ravenclaw's. Nothing from Gryffindor?" Ron asked. "The only known Gryffindor relic is the sword, which has been secure in Hogwarts for centuries," Harry explained. "It's also goblin-made silver, which would reject dark magic of this nature." The meeting evolved into a strategy session for locating and destroying these artifacts. Harry carefully divided responsibilities according to each person's strengths while maintaining overall coordination through a secure communication system developed by George and Fred Weasley based on their prototype, Extendable Ears. Meanwhile, Harry's political influence continued expanding through his proxy on the Wizengamot. Augusta Longbottom, representing the Potter seat, had formed a progressive alliance with Amelia Bones and several moderate pure-blood families. Their coalition had successfully passed reforms to magical creature regulations that, while modest by Harry's standards, represented significant progress for wizarding politics. The Centaurs actually sent a delegation to the Ministry, Neville reported during one of their private training sessions. "First time in over a century," according to Gran. They're cautiously optimistic about the new treaty terms. Harry nodded in satisfaction as he demonstrated a complex shielding technique. It's a start. Real change takes generations, but establishing the principle of equal negotiation rather than imposed regulation sets the foundation. By December, Harry's financial empire had expanded internationally. Working through Goblin intermediaries, he had established connections with magical communities from Singapore to Sao Paulo, creating a global network of investments and alliances that operated beyond Voldemort's reach. Diversification protects against localized instability, he explained to Hermione as they studied together in a private corner of the library. If Britain falls completely, our operations continue elsewhere, providing resources for resistance or reconstruction. You're planning for every contingency, she observed, not for the first time impressed by his foresight. I have to, Harry replied simply. Too many people depend on it. The weight of this responsibility showed occasionally in quiet moments, a heaviness in his eyes, tension in his shoulders that only Hermione seemed to notice. Despite his careful training and goblin-instilled discipline, Harry remained fundamentally human, carrying burdens few adults could manage. One evening, finding him alone on the astronomy tower after curfew, Hermione approached silently and simply took his hand. They stood together watching stars emerge above the Scottish Highlands, neither speaking for several minutes. Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like, Harry said eventually, his voice soft. Growing up normally. Going to Hogwarts as just Harry, not the boy who lived or the goblin-raised heir or the future anything. Hermione squeezed his hand gently. You'd have been exceptional regardless. It's who you are, not just how you were raised. Maybe, he acknowledged. But perhaps with fewer weight-of-the-world moments on astronomy towers. She turned to face him, moonlight silvering her features. Would you change it? If you could go back and grow up with your parents instead? The question was profound in its simplicity. Harry considered it seriously before answering. I would want them alive, he said finally. I would want to know them, to have their guidance and love. But the lessons the goblins taught me, the perspective they gave me, I wouldn't surrender that either. He met her gaze directly. And I wouldn't risk a path that didn't lead to this moment, with you. The admission hung between them, more direct than anything they'd previously acknowledged. Hermione's breath caught slightly before she stepped closer. I'm glad, she whispered, because I wouldn't change this either. Their first kiss was gentle, exploratory, a quiet confirmation of feelings that had been developing for years. When they parted, Harry felt something shift within him, as though a missing piece had finally settled into place. We should return before Filch finds us, he suggested reluctantly. Hermione nodded but made no immediate move to leave. Harry, whatever comes next, with Voldemort and everything else, we face it together. Not just as allies or friends, but as partners. Equals. I wouldn't have it any other way, he assured her, the words a solemn vow. The calm at Hogwarts shattered in May when Death Eaters breached the castle's defenses through a vanishing cabinet Draco Malfoy had repaired under duress. The attack coincided with Dumbledore's absence. He and Harry had departed to retrieve what they believed was Slytherin's locket from a seaside cave, only to find it replaced by a fake. Their return to Hogwarts revealed chaos, the dark mark hovering over the astronomy tower, sounds of battle echoing through corridors, and students huddled in secure locations established by Harry's defense network months earlier. Go to the Room of Requirement, Harry instructed Dumbledore, who had been weakened by a potion protecting the fake Horcrux. My people have established a medical station there. Your people, Harry? Dumbledore questioned, his keen intelligence piercing through his physical distress. When did Hogwarts students become your people? When adults failed to adequately protect them, Harry replied without apology. Now go, Professor. You're in no condition to fight. For once, Dumbledore followed a student's direction, perhaps recognizing the strategic sense behind it. Harry immediately activated his communication device, connecting with his lieutenants throughout the castle. Status report, he commanded, moving swiftly toward the sounds of combat. Death Eaters in the third-floor corridor, came Neville's voice. DA members containing them with barrier spells. No casualties on our side. Younger students secured in Chamber of Secrets access point, Luna reported calmly. Ginny's maintaining perimeter wards. Harry had repurposed the infamous chamber as an emergency shelter after confirming the basilisk was the only threat within it. With that danger eliminated years earlier, the chamber's isolation and single defensible entrance made it ideal for protection. Professor McGonagall is coordinating with Order members near the main entrance, Hermione added. Ron's team is supporting them. Understood. Harry made rapid calculations. I'm heading to the astronomy tower to assess the primary target. Hermione, bring a medical team to the room of requirement, Dumbledore's been injured. Everyone else maintain positions. The battle that followed demonstrated the effectiveness of Harry's preparation. While the Death Eaters had expected to find a vulnerable school protected mainly by teachers, they encountered instead an organized resistance of students fighting alongside staff in coordinated units, using tactics developed through months of DA training. Harry reached the astronomy tower to find Snape already there, one trained on Dumbledore. Several Death Eaters stood watching, including Bellatrix Lestrange and the Carrow siblings. Ah, the guest of honor arrives, Bellatrix cackled. Perfect timing, Potter. You can watch your precious Dumbledore die before joining him. That won't be happening, Bellatrix, Harry replied calmly, assessing the situation. Dumbledore looked even weaker than when Harry had left him, barely standing against the tower battlements. Snape's face remained impassive, his wand unwavering. Potter, he acknowledged coldly. Always interfering where you're not wanted. On the contrary, Harry countered. I'm precisely where I need to be. He glanced at Draco Malfoy, who stood pale and trembling near the Death Eaters, his own wand pointed half-heartedly toward Dumbledore. As is Draco, though not by choice, I think. This observation triggered Bellatrix's temper. Enough talk. Snape, do it now, or stand aside for someone with proper conviction. Snape's eyes flickered between Dumbledore and Harry, some unspoken communication passing between the professor and headmaster. Harry, recognizing the moment's significance, acted decisively. Presidium Argentum, he incanted, drawing his true wand. Silver light erupted around them, forming a dome that separated Snape and Dumbledore from the Death Eaters. The goblin-derived shield would hold for only moments against concerted attack, but those moments were critical. Whatever you and Dumbledore have planned, do it quickly, Harry told Snape, surprising the potion's master with his apparent insight. I'll handle the others. Without waiting for a response, Harry turned to face the outraged Death Eaters, his wand moving in patterns taught by Gornick years earlier, efficient, precise motions designed to maximize effect while conserving energy. The ensuing duel was brief but intense. Harry fought with a combination of standard wizard spells and goblin battle magic that left his opponents disoriented and increasingly desperate. Unlike the Department of Mystery's confrontation, where he had deliberately restrained his abilities, here Harry demonstrated his true capabilities without reservation. Bellatrix, recognizing the threat he posed, abandoned all pretense of toying with him. Avada Kedavra, she screamed, sending the killing curse directly at his chest. Harry didn't dodge. Instead, he conjured a silver disc that intercepted the green light, absorbing rather than reflecting it, a goblin technique for neutralizing certain energy-based spells by converting them into stored power. Impossible, Amicus Carrow gasped, voicing the Death Eaters' collective shock at seeing the supposedly unblockable curse contained. Many things are possible with the right knowledge, Harry replied, then released the absorbed energy in a controlled blast that sent his opponents sprawling. Behind him, a flash of green light within the silver dome signaled that whatever arrangement existed between Snape and Dumbledore had reached its conclusion. Harry didn't turn to look, maintaining his focus on the immediate threat. Retreat. Alecto Carrow called, realizing they were outmatched. The mission is accomplished. The Death Eaters withdrew, dragging their unconscious comrades. Harry allowed them to flee, knowing pursuit would extend the battle unnecessarily when his priority was securing the school. Only when they had disappeared down the tower stairs did he turn to find Dumbledore's body crumpled on the stone floor, Snape nowhere to be seen. Despite suspecting this outcome, the reality of it struck Harry with unexpected force. Whatever his disagreements with Dumbledore's methods, the ancient wizard had been a cornerstone of magical Britain's resistance against darkness. Harry knelt beside the fallen headmaster, checking for any sign of life despite knowing there would be none. As he did, he noticed Dumbledore's blackened, withered hand, the result of destroying Riddle's ring Horcrux, and an insight struck him. This hadn't been murder but mercy. Dumbledore had been dying already, and had transformed his inevitable death into a strategic asset by cementing Snape's cover as a loyal Death Eater. Clever to the end, Harry murmured, closing the headmaster's sightless eyes. But you might have trusted me with the plan. He took a moment to center himself, then activated his communication device again. Dumbledore has fallen, he informed his lieutenants, his voice steady despite the gravity of the news. Death Eaters are retreating. Maintain security protocols until we confirm full withdrawal. The school's response to Dumbledore's death revealed how completely Harry's influence had permeated Hogwarts. While the staff handled official procedures, it was Harry's network that maintained security, comforted younger students, and coordinated with Order members arriving in the aftermath. By dawn, as shock gave way to grief and uncertainty, Harry found himself effectively directing operations from the Room of Requirement, which had become a command center in all but name. The ministries sending representatives, Hermione reported, reviewing intelligence from their contacts. They'll want to close the school. Harry nodded, considering implications. Expected. We need contingency plans for continued education if that happens. Distance learning programs, secure meeting locations, modified DA structure. Already in development, she confirmed. But there's something else. She lowered her voice though the room's privacy wards ensured security. The locket from the cave, R.A.B. Regulus Arcturus Black, Harry supplied. Sirius's brother. I suspected when we saw the initials, but confirmed it through Creature last night. Hermione's eyebrows rose. You've been busy. The real Horcrux was in Grimmauld Place all along, Harry continued. Creature had been ordered to destroy it but couldn't manage it. I've secured it for proper disposal. That's 3 down then, she calculated. The diary, the ring, and now the locket. With likely 3 remaining, plus Voldemort himself, Harry confirmed. The cup is almost certainly in Bellatrix's Gringotts vault, based on her behavior patterns and family connection. The Ravenclaw item remains unidentified, but Luna's researching possibilities. And Nagini, the snake, never leaves Voldemort's side. Hermione studied him with increasing concern. You've mapped it all out, haven't you? The entire endgame. Harry met her gaze steadily. As best I can with available information. Voldemort will move quickly now that Dumbledore's gone. We need to be prepared. Harry, she said softly, placing her hand over his. When was the last time you rested? Really rested, not just tactical meditation between crises. The question caught him off guard. In truth, he couldn't remember. Between managing his business empire, coordinating defensive preparations, and pursuing Horcruxes, actual rest had become an increasingly rare luxury. I'll rest when it's finished, he said, then reconsidered at her troubled expression. But perhaps a short break is advisable for strategic clarity. Hermione's smile told him she recognized his goblin-trained reluctance to acknowledge human limitations. Strategic clarity. Of course. Nothing to do with being 17 and having just fought Death Eaters after watching your headmaster die. Her gentle teasing pierced his composed exterior, reminding him that despite everything, the training, the responsibilities, the empire building, he remained fundamentally human. Perhaps that was Hermione's greatest gift to him, keeping him connected to his humanity when goblin pragmatism and wartime necessity might otherwise have subsumed it completely. A few hours, he conceded. Then we continue preparations. Hogwarts did not reopen that September. The Ministry, now heavily infiltrated by Voldemort's supporters despite Scrimgeour's resistance, declared attendance mandatory at a reformed institution under new headmaster Severus Snape, with Death Eaters Amicus and Electo Caro as deputy heads. Harry, having reached his 17th birthday and claimed full lordship of both Potter and Black houses, did not return. Neither did most of his inner circle. Instead, they activated the network he had been building for years, safe houses across Britain and beyond, communication systems independent of compromised Ministry channels, and financial resources secured against seizure. "Welcome to the Resistance's headquarters," Harry told the gathered DA leaders as they assembled at Grippington Hall, which now served as their primary base of operations. The manor's expansive grounds, warded by both goblin and wizard magic, provided secure training facilities while its numerous rooms accommodated those whose families faced persecution. "Headquarters implies an organization," Neville observed, his face bearing fresh scars from confronting the Caros before escaping Hogwarts. "Are we officially forming one?" "We've been one for years," Luna pointed out serenely. "Just without declaring it." Harry nodded. "Luna's right. What began as a study group evolved into a defense force and now emerges as the primary opposition to Voldemort's regime. The Order of the Phoenix continues under Kingsley's leadership, but they're focused on protection and evacuation. Our mission is different. Horcrux hunting," Ron supplied, his strategic mind having developed considerably through their years of planning. "And then taking down you-know-who himself." "Precisely," Harry confirmed. "But we're also building what comes after. The foundations for a reformed wizarding Britain once Voldemort falls." This dual focus, immediate resistance alongside long-term reconstruction, distinguished Harry's approach from both the Ministry's reactionary policies and the Order's defensive stance. While others fought merely to survive or restore the pre-Voldemort status quo, Harry's vision extended to fundamental transformation of magical society. The following months saw this vision tested repeatedly as Voldemort's control tightened. The Ministry fell completely in November when Minister Scrimgeour was assassinated, replaced by puppet Pius Thickness. Muggle-born registration became mandatory, forcing many into hiding or exile. Even purebloods faced increasing scrutiny unless they actively supported the new regime. Through these darkening times, Harry's network operated with increasing effectiveness. His businesses, now primarily managed by trusted proxies, continued generating resources that funded resistance activities. His intelligence apparatus, built through years of careful relationship development, provided crucial information about Death Eater movements and Voldemort's plans. Most importantly, his Horcrux hunt progressed steadily. By Christmas, they had identified Ravenclaw's lost diadem as the missing artifact and located it within Hogwarts itself, information provided by the Grey Lady through Luna's unique ability to communicate with the more reticent ghosts. "The infiltration team is in position," Neville reported via communication mirror in late December. He led a contingent that had remained at Hogwarts, operating an underground resistance from the Room of Requirement. "We can secure the diadem whenever you're ready to move." "Excellent," Harry replied from Grippington's war room, where maps and intelligence reports covered every surface. "Coordinate with Luna's team for the extraction. We'll destroy it alongside the others once we have all the accessible targets." Hermione looked up from the ancient text she was studying, a rare goblin manuscript on soul magic that Ragnok had provided despite traditional prohibitions against sharing such knowledge with wizards. "Harry," she said urgently, "I think I've found something about the destruction method. The goblins developed a ritual specifically for cleansing objects containing fragmented souls. Does it require the object's destruction?" Harry asked, joining her at the massive oak table. "No," she replied, excitement coloring her voice. "That's what makes it revolutionary. It extracts and neutralizes the soul fragment while preserving the host object." This discovery proved invaluable when they finally executed their plan to retrieve Hufflepuff's cup from the Lestrange vault at Gringotts. Rather than the direct break-in they had initially considered, Harry leveraged his unique position as both a goblin friend and the legal head of House Black. "By right of family magic and conquest, "I claim authority over all assets belonging to Bellatrix Lestrange née Black," he declared in formal Goblin language before the Gringotts Council. "I seek not to remove wealth from Goblin protection but to extract a corrupted artifact that threatens Goblin security itself. This approach, respecting Goblin sovereignty while appealing to their own interests, succeeded where a conventional heist would have failed." The council granted limited access to the vault under supervision, allowing Harry to identify and remove the cup without violating Gringotts' integrity. By March, they had assembled 4 Horcruxes, the locket, the cup, the diadem, and the already destroyed diary, in a specially warded chamber beneath Grippington Hall. The Goblin ritual required precise timing and extensive preparation, but promised to neutralize the soul fragments without the volatile destruction methods they had previously considered. "The alignment occurs at the spring equinox," Harry explained to the gathered inner circle. "Hermione will lead the ritual while I provide the necessary power channeling. The rest of you maintain the containment wards in case anything unexpected occurs." "And after?" Ron asked. "That leaves just the snake and you-know-who himself." "Then we force a confrontation on our terms," Harry replied. "With his anchors destroyed, Voldemort becomes merely a powerful dark wizard, formidable, but mortal." The ritual itself was a testament to Goblin magical sophistication. Hermione, having mastered the complex incantations through weeks of intensive study, conducted the ceremony with precision that would have impressed even the Goblin elders. Harry's role proved physically demanding, channeling raw magical energy through specially crafted silver conductors to power the extraction process. As midnight approached on the equinox, the Horcruxes began emitting black smoke that coalesced into screaming spectral forms. These fragments of Voldemort's soul fought violently against extraction, requiring Harry to draw deeply on his magical reserves to complete the process. When the final fragment had been contained and neutralized in a specially prepared crystal vessel, Harry collapsed to his knees, exhausted but triumphant. The objects themselves, historically priceless artifacts now cleansed of corruption, remained intact, their magic unmarred by the dark presence that had inhabited them. "It worked," Hermione confirmed, her voice hoarse from hours of continuous incantation. "They're clean." This success marked a crucial turning point in their campaign. With 4 Horcruxes neutralized and only Nagini remaining before Voldemort himself became vulnerable, the resistance transitioned from defensive operations to preparing for final confrontation. April brought unexpected developments as conditions at Hogwarts deteriorated under the Carrow's increasingly brutal regime. Neville's underground resistance faced mounting pressure, forcing Harry to implement extraction plans sooner than anticipated. "We're moving all endangered students to safe houses," he informed the War Council after receiving Neville's urgent communication. "Grippington can accommodate 30, with others distributed to international locations according to our evacuation protocol." "What about Hogwarts itself?" Ginny asked, having recently escaped the school herself after the Carrows targeted her for her family's known Order connections. "Do we abandon it to them?" "Temporarily," Harry confirmed. "The priority is protecting people, not holding territory. We'll reclaim Hogwarts when the time is right." That time came sooner than expected. In early May, their intelligence network reported Voldemort had discovered the destruction of his Horcruxes and was moving to secure the last one, Nagini, while planning a decisive strike against the resistance. "He's cornered and knows it," Harry analyzed, reviewing the reports with his inner circle. "His behavior's becoming increasingly erratic. Multiple sources confirm he's preparing to attack Hogwarts directly, believing we're headquartered there due to the student evacuations." "A trap?" Hermione suggested. "An opportunity," Harry corrected. "If he commits his forces to Hogwarts, we can engage him on prepared ground with defensive advantages. More importantly, he'll bring Nagini, believing she's safer under his direct protection. So we let him think he's springing a trap on us, when actually we're setting one for him," Ron summarized, his strategic mind immediately grasping the potential. "Brilliant." The plan took shape rapidly. Using their extensive network, Harry's forces prepared Hogwarts for battle while appearing to withdraw. Secret passages were rigged with sensors, defensive positions established throughout the castle, and evacuation routes secured for non-combatants. Most crucially, Harry implemented the Goblin battle strategy he had been developing for years, focusing not on direct confrontation where Voldemort's forces held numerical advantage, but on targeted strikes against critical vulnerabilities. In this case, Nagini. We need a special team focused solely on the snake, he explained during their final briefing at Grippington Hall. Neville will lead it, with Luna and Ginny providing support. The rest of our forces engage Death Eaters conventionally, creating necessary distractions. And Voldemort himself? Hermione asked, the unspoken question hanging heavy in the air. Harry met her gaze steadily. He'll come for me eventually. When he does, I'll be ready. The night before their departure for Hogwarts, Harry found a quiet moment with Hermione in Grippington's gardens. The spring air carried the scent of blooming flowers, incongruously peaceful against the war preparations surrounding them. I have something for you, he said, producing a small silver box inscribed with goblin runes. A contingency, just in case. Hermione accepted it cautiously. What kind of contingency? Open it, he encouraged. Inside lay 2 items, a delicate gold ring set with a small ruby, and a sealed parchment bearing the Potter family seal. The ring is a portkey connected to our most secure international location, Harry explained. If everything goes wrong tomorrow, if I fall and our forces are overwhelmed, this will activate automatically, taking you to safety along with the legal documents needed to access certain secured accounts. Hermione stared at him, understanding dawning in her eyes. You're naming me your heir. Not just for wealth, Harry clarified. For mission. Someone needs to continue what we've started, even if I can't. There's no one I trust more completely. She closed the box carefully, then set it aside without taking the ring. I appreciate the thought, Harry, but I won't need this. We're facing Voldemort together, as agreed. Partners. Equals. Hermione, no, she interrupted firmly. I understand preparation for contingencies. It's sensible, practical. Very goblin of you. But this particular contingency assumes I'd leave you behind or continue without you, and that's not happening. Her determination was absolute, brooking no argument. Instead of pressing further, Harry simply nodded, accepting her decision while silently maintaining the contingency. The ring would activate regardless in certain circumstances, a protection she hadn't agreed to but that he couldn't forego providing. Then let's ensure neither of us requires contingency plans, he said instead, drawing her close. Their kiss held both tenderness and urgency, acknowledgement of what they stood to lose and determination to protect what they had built together. When they finally parted, Hermione's eyes shimmered with unshed tears despite her resolute expression. Whatever happens tomorrow, she whispered, know that loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. And mine, Harry replied, the words simple but profound in their sincerity. The Battle of Hogwarts began at dawn on May 2, 1998, as Voldemort's forces surrounded the castle. What they expected, a desperate, disorganized resistance scrambling to defend itself, bore little resemblance to what they found. Harry's preparations had transformed Hogwarts into a layered defensive position where each apparent vulnerability concealed a trap. Death Eaters breaching the outer wards encountered not panicked students but disciplined fighters executing pre-planned counterattacks. Attempts to use giants against the castle walls were met with goblin-engineered countermeasures that redirected their massive strength against their controllers. From the astronomy tower, now serving as the Resistance's command center, Harry directed operations with calm efficiency, coordinating responses through the communication network the Weasley twins had perfected over years of development. Perimeter breach in the East Courtyard, reported George, who managed battlefield intelligence. Death Eater squad with werewolf support. Deploy Charlie's team, Harry instructed. Dragon handler tactics should be effective against werewolves. And send Luna's secondary unit to secure the breach once it's contained. Hermione, coordinating the medical response, glanced up from her station. Casualties? Minimal so far, Harry assured her. The evacuation protocols worked perfectly. Only volunteers remain in combat positions. As morning progressed into afternoon, the battle's pattern became clear. Voldemort, expecting to overwhelm the defenders quickly, found his forces instead engaged in resource-draining skirmishes that yielded little strategic advantage. His frustration manifested in increasingly direct magical attacks against the castle's core wards, attacks that drained his personal power without decisive results. "He's getting desperate," Harry observed, monitoring the magical signatures through specialized sensors developed with goblin assistance. "The snake remains in the boathouse under heavy guard. That's where he'll make his stand if the assault continues to fail." "Neville's team is in position," Ron confirmed from his tactical station. "Awaiting your signal." The moment to strike came as Voldemort, enraged by his army's lack of progress, called a temporary ceasefire to deliver an ultimatum: Harry Potter must surrender himself or watch everyone in Hogwarts die. "Perfect timing," Harry remarked, his calm at odds with the dire threat. "He's isolated himself with minimal protection to conserve energy for what he believes will be our final confrontation." "The trap is ready," Hermione confirmed, though concern shadowed her eyes. "But Harry, it's still incredibly dangerous." "All worthwhile endeavors carry risk," he replied, echoing one of Ragnok's favorite maxims. "But we've planned for every contingency." Harry's strategy represented the culmination of everything the goblins had taught him, not confronting superior force directly, but manipulating circumstances to create favorable conditions. While Voldemort expected Harry to either surrender nobly or attempt some desperate heroic stand, the actual plan involved neither. "Strike teams in position," came Neville's confirmation through the communication network. "The snake is vulnerable." "Execute primary sequence," Harry commanded, then turned to Hermione. "Activate the ward modifications." What followed demonstrated why Harry Potter had become known among the Resistance as the strategist rather than merely the chosen one. As Neville's team engaged Voldemort's snake guardians with surprising effectiveness, Hermione activated specialized ward configurations that isolated the boathouse from magical reinforcement. Simultaneously, Harry implemented the most controversial aspect of his plan, a modified goblin illusion charm that projected a convincing duplicate of himself approaching Voldemort in apparent surrender. "He's taking the bait," Ron reported, monitoring the situation through specialized viewing crystals. "Death Eaters are holding position while he engages you personally." The Real Harry was already moving through a secret passage with a small strike team including Sirius, Lupin, and key members of the DA's combat specialists. Their objective, not to confront Voldemort directly but to secure the newly vulnerable Nagini once Neville's distraction reached its peak. "Remember," Harry instructed as they approached the concealed exit near the boathouse, "our priority is the snake. Engage Voldemort only if absolutely necessary and never individually." The plan executed with precision born of years of training. As Voldemort monologued to Harry's illusory double, Neville's team created an explosive diversion on the opposite side of the boathouse. In the momentary confusion, Harry's strike team emerged, focusing overwhelming force against the Death Eaters guarding Nagini. The snake herself proved formidable, enhanced by dark magic and possessing a fragment of Voldemort's soul that granted unnatural awareness. Yet against coordinated attackers implementing goblin battle tactics, striking from multiple angles with complementary spells, even this powerful Horcrux stood little chance. Neville delivered the killing blow with Gryffindor's sword, which he had retrieved from the headmaster's office during the battle's preparation phase. The blade, imbued with basilisk venom from Harry's second-year encounter, cleaved through Nagini's magically reinforced scales with surprising ease. Voldemort's scream of rage upon seeing his final Horcrux destroyed shattered the illusory Harry and sent a shockwave of magic that staggered everyone nearby. His red eyes, incandescent with fury, fixed on the real Harry emerging from tactical cover. "Potter," he hissed, voice barely human in its hatred. "Always tricks and deceptions. Face me directly, if you dare. No more hiding behind others." Harry stepped forward calmly, his wand, the silver-threaded rowan with its goblin blood core, held ready but not threatening. "I'm not hiding, Tom. I simply understand something you never have. True power lies not in domination but in cooperation. As if to demonstrate this principle, Harry's allies formed a loose semicircle behind him, not interfering but present, a visible reminder that he fought not alone but as part of something larger. Sentimental nonsense, Voldemort spat. Your friends cannot save you. Your parents learned that lesson. Your precious Dumbledore learned it too. Now it's your turn. You misunderstand, Harry replied, his voice steady. They're not here to save me. They're here to witness the end of your misguided quest for immortality. Voldemort's face contorted with rage and perhaps, for the first time, a flicker of genuine fear. With all Horcruxes destroyed, he faced true mortality for the first time since his youth. Then let us end this, Potter. Let us see if the vaunted boy who lived can match Lord Voldemort in direct combat. The duel that followed would be remembered in wizarding history not for spectacular magical displays, though these certainly occurred, but for its striking contrast in styles. Voldemort attacked with overwhelming force, casting spells of tremendous power designed to obliterate his opponent completely. Harry, conversely, fought with goblin-influenced precision, using minimal energy for maximum effect. Avada Kedavra. Voldemort cast, sending the killing curse hurtling toward Harry for the third time in their shared history. Instead of dodging or conjuring physical objects to intercept, Harry implemented a technique no wizard had ever witnessed, a goblin deflection charm that redirected magical energy rather than blocking it. The killing curse curved away, striking a nearby wall with explosive force. Impossible, Voldemort snarled, genuine shock replacing his rage momentarily. The killing curse cannot be deflected. Another assumption that limits you, Harry replied, counterattacking not with lethal magic but with precisely targeted spells that forced Voldemort to expend energy on shields and evasion. Magic isn't bound by artificial classifications. It responds to understanding and intent. As the duel progressed, a pattern emerged that few observers initially recognized but Hermione, watching with analytical detachment despite her emotional investment, identified immediately. Harry wasn't trying to defeat Voldemort through superior spell power, an approach doomed to failure against a wizard of Voldemort's experience and raw magical strength. Instead, he was systematically draining his opponent's reserves through efficient counterattacks that required disproportionate defensive responses. He's using financial strategy in magical combat, she realized aloud, drawing confused glances from nearby observers. Forcing Voldemort to make increasingly poor investments of magical energy while preserving his own capital. This approach, fundamentally goblin in its pragmatism, gradually shifted the duel's momentum. Voldemort's spells, while still devastatingly powerful, came with increasing gaps between castings. His movements, initially fluid and precise, grew fractionally slower as magical exhaustion took its toll. Tiring, Tom? Harry inquired during one such momentary lull, his own breathing controlled and even. Perhaps immortality pursuit neglected stamina development. The taunt, delivered in the formal cadence of goblin combat banter, provoked exactly the response Harry anticipated. Voldemort abandoned tactical restraint for raw power, channeling enormous magical energy into a sustained assault that would have overwhelmed most opponents. I will not be mocked by a child, he roared, conjuring a serpent of fiendfire that filled the boathouse with scorching heat. Rather than countering with equivalent force, Harry implemented the final element of his strategy, a goblin containment field that trapped the fiendfire in a collapsing energy sphere, forcing the destructive magic back upon its caster. Voldemort, already magically depleted from the extended duel, found his own creation turning against him. The fiendfire, responding to his weakening control, began consuming his magical shields. This is impossible, he gasped, genuine fear now evident in his serpentine features. No wizard can control fiendfire this way. I'm not just a wizard, Harry replied, advancing steadily as the containment field compressed further. I am goblin-trained, goblin-allied, and goblin-friend. My magic acknowledges no arbitrary limitations. With a final gesture of his silver-threaded wand, Harry collapsed the containment field completely. The fiendfire, now completely beyond Voldemort's control, consumed its creator in a conflagration of magical backlash. The Dark Lord's final scream echoed briefly before silence fell, broken only by the gentle crackle of dissipating magical energy. Where Voldemort had stood remained only ash, the mortal remains of a wizard who had feared death so desperately that he had fragmented his very soul to avoid it. For several heartbeats, no one moved or spoke. Then Hermione stepped forward to stand beside Harry, taking his free hand in hers. One by one, their allies joined them, Neville, Luna, Ron, Sirius, Lupin, and dozens more who had fought not just today but through years of preparation and resistance. "It's finished," Harry said quietly, though his voice carried in the stillness. "Voldemort is gone." Yet even in this moment of triumph, his mind had already shifted to what would follow. The battle against Voldemort had always been only one phase of his larger vision, necessary but preliminary to the real work of transformation. "Not finished," he amended, addressing the gathered fighters who looked to him with mingled exhaustion and hope. "Just beginning. We've removed a symptom. Now we address the disease." The weeks following Voldemort's defeat witnessed a society in transition. With the Ministry's leadership decimated, some dead in battle, others exposed as willing collaborators, a power vacuum emerged that various factions scrambled to fill. Traditionally, this would have resulted in hasty restoration of pre-war power structures with minimal substantive change. Instead, Harry implemented the governance transition plan he had developed years earlier, leveraging his unique position to guide rather than dictate the reformation process. The Provisional Governing Council will include representatives from all magical communities, he explained during the first public assembly held in the partially restored Great Hall at Hogwarts. "Not just wizards and witches, but goblins, centaurs, house elves, and other sentient magical peoples with stake in our shared future." This announcement provoked predictable outrage from traditionalists who had expected the boy who lived to simply hand power back to the old guard once the crisis passed. "Preposterous," objected Cornelius Fudge, attempting to reclaim relevance in the post-war environment. "Non-human magical creatures cannot participate in wizarding governance. It violates centuries of tradition." "Those traditions," Harry replied calmly, "produced 2 Dark Lords within 50 years and left us vulnerable to repeated catastrophic failures of leadership. Perhaps it's time to reconsider their merits." The debate raged for days, but Harry held significant advantages his opponents had not anticipated. His financial empire, carefully built and protected through the war years, now controlled sufficient economic leverage to influence even the most reluctant parties. Those who might have opposed him most effectively had largely discredited themselves through collaboration with Voldemort's regime. Most importantly, Harry had spent years cultivating relationships across magical society, not just with powerful families like the Longbottoms and Bones, but with overlooked communities from house elves to mere people. "He's not seizing power conventionally," Hermione explained to puzzled reporters from the newly reformed Daily Prophet. "He's creating platforms where power can be shared more equitably, then stepping back to allow natural leaders from each community to emerge." This approach, facilitating rather than dominating, confused traditional power brokers but resonated with a population exhausted by authoritarianism. When the Provisional Council held its first formal session in July, 3 months after Voldemort's defeat, its membership reflected magical diversity unprecedented in British history: wizards alongside goblins, centaur representatives beside vampire delegates, house elf advocates participating as equals rather than servants. Harry himself accepted no official position beyond advisor to the transition, focusing instead on implementing the financial reforms that would underpin lasting change. "Political structures remain vulnerable without economic foundation," he explained to Ragnok during a private meeting at Gringotts. "We need integrated financial systems that recognize value creation across magical communities." The Goblin director nodded approvingly. "Your proposed banking reforms would have been unthinkable a decade ago. Even now, many of my people view them with suspicion." "As do many wizards," Harry acknowledged. "Change threatens established interests on both sides. But the benefits outweigh the discomfort." His core innovation, a parallel currency system that allowed both wizard gold and goblin silver to serve as legal tender throughout magical Britain, resolved centuries of tension over monetary control. Supplemented by reformed property rights that recognized goblin craftsmanship without eliminating human inheritance traditions, these changes created economic interdependence where previous systems had fostered division. By autumn, the initial shock of transformation had given way to cautious optimism as tangible benefits emerged. Magical businesses, freed from artificial regulatory constraints that had limited cross-species commerce, experienced unprecedented growth. Educational reforms implemented at Hogwarts under McGonagall's progressive leadership introduced students to diverse magical traditions previously considered outside proper wizarding knowledge. Most significantly, a new generation of leaders began emerging across magical society, individuals selected for competence rather than bloodline or species, mentored through programs Harry established using resources from both Potter and Black estates. "You've created something revolutionary," Hermione observed during a rare quiet moment at Grippington Hall, which now served as both their home and an informal diplomatic center. "Not through conquest or domination, but through systems that empower others." Harry smiled, watching autumn leaves drift across the estate's grounds from the library window. "I had excellent teachers. Ragnok always emphasized that true wealth isn't hoarded but circulated productively." "Speaking of circulation," Hermione said, setting aside the legal text she'd been reviewing, "the International Confederation has formally requested your presence at next month's summit. Apparently, magical communities in Eastern Europe are interested in implementing similar reforms." Harry considered this thoughtfully. "Our model isn't universally applicable. Each community needs solutions tailored to their specific history and challenges. Which is exactly why they're asking for you specifically," she pointed out. "Not to impose our system, but to help them develop their own compatible versions." This expanding international influence represented the final aspect of Harry's vision, not British magical exceptionalism, but global magical cooperation built on shared principles adapted to local conditions. Already, delegations from magical governments worldwide had visited to study what wizard journalists had begun calling the Potter approach to integrated magical governance. "We'll need to prepare comprehensive briefing materials," Harry mused, mind already organizing the necessary components. Historical context, economic models, cultural considerations. Hermione laughed softly, the sound drawing his attention from strategic planning. "There's the goblin-raised wizard I fell in love with. Always 3 steps ahead, planning for contingencies." Harry smiled, abandoning his mental cataloging to join her on the library sofa. "Some habits remain useful beyond their original purpose." "Indeed," she agreed, leaning against him comfortably. "Though I've noticed you're learning to balance goblin efficiency with human spontaneity more effectively these days." This observation carried more significance than its casual delivery suggested. Throughout their years together, Hermione had gently helped Harry navigate the complexities of his dual nature, honoring the goblin principles that shaped his worldview while embracing the human connections that gave those principles meaning. "I had an excellent teacher for that too," he acknowledged, kissing her temple gently. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the arrival of a majestic eagle owl bearing official-looking correspondence. Harry recognized the Wisengamot seal immediately. "The final vote on the Magical Beings Equal Rights Act," he noted, accepting the parchment. The legislation, representing the culmination of decades of activism accelerated by Harry's influence, would formally enshrine legal equality for all sentient magical beings throughout Britain. Hermione watched anxiously as he broke the seal and read the enclosed message. "Well?" Harry's expression remained carefully neutral until he reached the final paragraph, then broke into a genuine smile, not the measured expression he presented publicly, but the unguarded joy he reserved for private moments. "Passed with 78% approval," he reported. "Effective immediately." The significance of this moment, this fundamental transformation of a society that had maintained rigid hierarchies for centuries, settled over them both. What had begun with a goblin's rescue of an abused child had culminated in the reimagining of an entire magical world. "We should celebrate properly," Hermione suggested, her eyes bright with unshed tears of joy. "Invite everyone, Ragnok and the Goblin Council, Neville and Luna, the Weasleys, Sirius and Remus, representatives from all the communities who fought for this." Harry nodded, already mentally composing the guest list. A formal recognition ceremony would be appropriate. Perhaps at Hogwarts, symbolizing the educational foundation of our new society. Always the diplomat, she teased gently, then grew serious. Harry, are you happy? Truly happy with how everything has unfolded? The question gave him pause. Throughout his life, from his rescue at age 2 through the war and subsequent reconstruction, Harry had focused on objectives rather than personal satisfaction. Happiness seemed almost irrelevant compared to effectiveness. Yet looking at Hermione, his partner in every sense, and considering the world they had built together, he recognized that somewhere along the way, happiness had found him regardless. Yes, he answered simply. Not because everything is perfect, but because what we've built has purpose beyond ourselves. The goblin concept of Harnack Vor, strength in different metals, has proven true. Our society is stronger through diversity than it ever was through enforced homogeneity. Hermione smiled, understanding as always the depth behind his words. From the boy in the cupboard to the architect of a new magical world. Quite a journey. Not completed, Harry amended, his mind already considering the work still ahead, international cooperation to address global magical challenges, educational reforms to sustain progress beyond the current generation, economic innovations to create prosperity across all magical communities. No, Hermione agreed, taking his hand. But well begun. As evening settled over Grippington Hall, Harry Potter, goblin-raised, wizard-born, leader by action rather than declaration, contemplated the path that had brought him here. From the desperate rescue by Gringotts at age 2 to becoming the wealthiest and most influential figure in modern magical history, his journey had defied every expectation set for the boy who lived. He had become neither Dumbledore's sacrificial weapon nor Voldemort's prophesied nemesis, but something entirely unexpected, a bridge between worlds, a reformer rather than a conqueror, a king not through crown or title but through the most enduring form of power, the ability to transform systems themselves. In the quiet library, surrounded by books from magical traditions worldwide and holding the hand of the brilliant witch who had seen his true nature from the beginning, Harry Potter finally allowed himself to fully embrace both sides of his unique heritage, the goblin values of strategy, efficiency and honor alongside the human capacity for love, adaptation and hope. The boy who had once been rescued from a cupboard had indeed become a king. Not through gold alone, though his wealth was undeniable. Not through conquest, though his defeat of Voldemort was historic. But through vision, the ability to see possibilities where others saw only traditions, to build connections where history had created divisions. The richest king in wizarding history had discovered that true wealth lay not in gold-filled vaults but in a transformed world where different peoples governed together, where ancient knowledge flowed freely across artificial boundaries, and where power served purpose rather than privilege. And in that discovery lay his greatest legacy. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.